Welcome to the December 21st, 2023 meeting of the Palo Alto Architecture Review Board. Can we have a roll call, please?
Chair Bolte,
Present.
Vice Chair Rosenberg,
Present.
Board Member Adcock,
Present.
Board Member Chen,
Present.
Board Member Hirsch.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Next item on our agenda is public comment. Are there any members of the public who wish to address us on any item not on our agenda today?
I have no request to speak.
Thank you very much. Next item is agenda changes, additions, and deletions. I have no changes. Staff, do we have any changes?
No changes.
I actually have a change in terms of the meeting schedule and assignments. I have a day I know it will not be here.
Okay.
So that will be February 1st.
Okay. Thanks for letting me know.
Anyone else? If not, next item is city official reports. Staff.
Thank you. So the January 4th hearing will be canceled. We are planning to have a January 18th hearing. Right now we had 660 University Avenue indicated on here. Depending on finalizing the CEQA, this may be pushed out again for another hearing, but I believe we will have a preliminary review that just came, that was just assigned that I think we're now going to place on this agenda. Do you recall the address of that application?
Yeah, it's 1066 East Meadow Circle.
Okay, thank you. And as far as new applications, I think after we publish this agenda, the 116, I'm sorry, the East Meadow Circle project was just filed. And we actually just had a filing of a SB 330 pre-application for Buena Vista Mobile Home after this was published as well for the redevelopment of that. And so those were two projects that are not listed on here, but just wanted to make you aware of.
Could you tell me again which two projects there are? Claire, they sound significant.
What was the East Meadow Circle?
It's 1066 East Meadow Circle. It is a preliminary application that, yeah, just came in. It's not a housing project, though. It's a commercial use.
It's a commercial use project.
I think it was a school, right?
Yeah, it's actually the Silicon Valley International School building like or proposing a preschool to first or second grade.
Is that an SB 330?
Oh, is that not working?
Okay.
Uh-oh.
It is not an SB 330 project because it is not housing.
And then the other one was 3980 El Camino. It's an El Camino address, but it's actually on Los Robles Street, but Buena Vista Mobile Home Park. And it's going to be redeveloped, split into two lots, and a proposed 61 unit rental project will be coming through the city for review. There will be another portion of the project that's 44 units that would be ownership mobile homes that would be processed under the HCD regulations by HCD versus the city.
Those are significant projects. I'd like to have our ad hoc committees. When can we find out a little bit more about them? When would you put them on the list, Claire? Do you think?
We would put them on the list for the next hearing, but I'm also happy to send out just an email since we have kind of a delay between when these were filed, and since the 4th is going to be canceled, I'm happy to send out an email just to summarize.
Fair enough.
There are, they were just filed in the last couple days, so we'll be getting a website up, and then I can just share the website for those.
If you could share information with my colleagues on the board by our next meeting, let's all be ready for people to volunteer to be on ad hoc committees for these two projects. Okay, before we go further, Board Member Rosenberg, your microphone is not working.
It's
I think I wiggled the wire and got it back online.
thank you. Good.
We're okay. Okay. Any other items under, okay, so we're going to move on then to our first official item. It's an action item. Public hearing that's quasi judicial for 824 San Antonio Road. Consideration of a major architecture review to allow the construction of a new 4-story mixed-use building with 28 dwelling units and 2,694 square feet of retail space. 15 units will be independent senior living, 12 will be assisted senior living, and 1 owner's unit. On-site amenities include 2 common outdoor open spaces, a dining facility, and a common indoor space. Before we get started, can we do disclosures, please? Does anyone have anything to disclose? Board Member Adcock?
I visited the site.
Board Member Chen?
I visited the site.
I'll disclose that I also visited the site, although not recently. Board Member Rosenberg?
I visited the site.
Board Member Hirsch?
I visited the site again.
Thank you. Okay, with that, can we have a staff report, please?
Hi, good morning. My name is Emily Callis. I'm the project planner for 824 San Antonio. This is a major architectural review application for a 4-story mixed-use building with 28 units and approximately 2,600 square feet of retail space. The project is using the Housing Incentive Program, which is a zoning increase to the floor area that is on San Antonio between Middlefield and Charleston Road. And this project is anticipated to be using the contextual design criteria. This is the first ARB hearing to gain early feedback. There are outstanding department comments and the project will need to address those before it's ready for approval. The project also had preliminary architectural board review on September 15th of last year. This map shows the project location on San Antonio Road. It is directly adjacent to the sorry, this is not that one. There are multiple projects on this street. It is closer to the East Charleston Road corner end of the Housing Incentive Program area. There is a car rental, and then there's the proposed 800 San Antonio PHZ project to the south, and then moving further south is the 788 San Antonio project that's been approved. This shows the existing site. It is currently, or most recently, a gym, but this building would be demolished as a part of the project proposal. The site is 19,412 approximately square feet in the CS zoning district. It contains 2 large redwood trees that would be preserved on the southern side of the site. It proposes to remove and replace approximately 15 other trees. The ground floor includes retail space, currently shown in 2 retail spaces plus a lobby cafe. Parking is provided below grade with 29 parking spaces and 52 bike parking spaces. The upper floors have the assisted living and the independent living, with the assisted living units closer to the lower floors and the independent living on the upper floors. Since this project is in the Housing Incentive Program, they are allowed a maximum commercial FAR of 0.4 and a max total FAR of 2.0. The residential amenities proposed include dining and community spaces and outdoor spaces looking towards those redwood trees in the rear, and they've also proposed a rooftop garden. This shows the elevations compared to the preliminary review, with the currently proposed on the right and the previous on, or sorry, the currently proposed on the left and the previously proposed on the right. The materials proposed include white cement plaster, white metal on the screening element furthest to the left, and wood tone screens and accents in the center and on the base. This is the side looking at those redwood trees. This is the side facing the adjacent gas station. And this is a slide that was not correctly updated. Key considerations are open space. So the balconies that have been provided are only in the independent living units. The assisted living units would meet their open space requirement through the common open spaces. However, the balconies that are currently proposed in the plan set do not meet the minimum 6-foot depth requirement. Additionally, the rooftop garden is proposed and it is allowed per the zoning. However, the zoning code states that it cannot be used to meet required open space minimum. And additionally, the project currently doesn't show street trees, which will be required. In terms of materials compared to the preliminary review, which the board had commented that the materials overall seemed dark, have been lightened with a lot of white materials being added. The metal proposed is primarily a dark bronze color, and then the wood accents. And the materials board is up at the dais. For the retail space, the minimum required is 2,913 square feet. As in order to do residential in the CS zoning district, it needs to be part of a mixed use project. And so, as stated earlier, they're proposing the 2 retail spaces and the lobby coffee shop. So, you know, we want to ensure that it is accessible and usable, both to the residents and to the public. And then the parking for the retail is not currently sufficiently detailed in the plans, and a shared parking agreement may be considered. In terms of CEQA, we are currently still reviewing this, but are anticipating it will be consistent with the previously certified Housing Incentive Program expansion EIR. And the project would be subject to all relevant mitigation measures in accordance with that EIR. And staff recommends that the board discuss this project, provide comments, and continue to a date uncertain. This concludes my presentation. The project architect, Athena Carter, is attending via Zoom and has a presentation as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Okay, let's go. Do we have any questions for staff on this project? We'll have other chances to ask questions as well, but
You didn't, can I?
go ahead.
Could you, how many people are there? How many tenants in this building? Do you have that figure? How many of the residents in this building?
In the existing building or the proposed?
Proposed building?
Okay. So it would be 28 units. There is a mix, I believe, of 1 bedroom and 2 bedroom. The applicant may be able to provide more information on that.
Let's wait, David, for that question. Let's wait till we hear from the applicant and we can ask them
Okay.
that question. Is there anything for staff we'd like to ask? David, any?
No.
Okay, let's bring the,
I have one question that maybe for the architect, but maybe staff.
go ahead.
For the rooftop usage, it appears that it's purely for the owner's unit. So are there any limitations or about that? I know about the whole, the open space requirement, but it's just unclear like how that is accessed. It appears to be accessed by everybody, but it's small and seems to be only for the owner's unit. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, that wouldn't be something that's allowed by the zoning code and wasn't necessarily something I got the impression of in my review of the plans, but the architect can certainly speak to that.
Let's instead perhaps give us a summary of the requirements regarding the rooftop open space. Is it allowed by code? What are the parameters? How is it allowed to be accessed?
Yes, it would be required to be accessed by a common stair that's accessible to everyone.
Yeah, it needs to be accessible to all residents under 1840, I think 230, yeah.
And are there setback requirements or distances from the edge it's allowed to go to in either the current code or by our objective standards?
There is a 45-degree daylight plane measured from, I believe, the parapet, the edge of, yeah.
Edge of
That's
the
something
deck.
for us to keep in mind. And then is the accessing elevator shaft or stair shaft allowed to project above the height limit for this sort of thing?
Yes.
Any other questions regarding that rooftop terrace?
He might be more for the architect, so.
Okay, so we'll
I'll
get to
hold my
that.
questions. Thank you.
Okay, let's see if we can bring the architect up. We could have them online. Will have 10 minutes to make a presentation. At the beginning, please state and spell your name for the record, just so the transcriber can hear it and see it. Go ahead.
Absolutely. Well, hello, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to present this project. I'm Kate Conley. That's Kateconley. And Athena, do you have the ability to share screen?
Can we get the 10-minute timer started, please?
No, I don't have the ability to share screen. Or actually, yeah, I do. Sorry.
Great. Wonderful.
Oh, it's saying I'm sharing, but I don't see it on the Zoom
We
screen.
can see it.
Okay, great.
Let me know when you're ready, board members.
But please go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, wonderful. All right. Well, thank you for the opportunity to present this project, our proposed development at 824 San Antonio Road. We shared this project at a preliminary ARB meeting last year, and we're pleased to present how our design has developed based on your commentary. Again, I'm Kate Conley with Architects Fora, the principal architect for this development. I'm joined by Athena Carter, our project lead, and our design architect partner, Jennifer Kretschmer. Our client, the property owner, approached us with the primary goal to design a senior living facility that would be enjoyable and include amenities that meet her own dreams of retirement. So this is a very personal project for her. The existing structure on the property is a retail office structure and currently has one tenant, a boxing and fitness gym. Adjacent neighbors include a gas station, 2 fast food restaurants, and a car rental facility. The site is easily accessible from several public transit routes, including the VTA 22 and MVGO lines, and San Antonio Road has protected bike lanes. The streetscape diagrams show our building massing in relation to neighboring sites, including the proposed 800 San Antonio and approved 788 San Antonio multifamily developments. You'll notice that we did not step back the building mass on the upper floors of our proposed building per the daylight plane objective standards, and we did this because the project is in that housing incentive program area. We expect adjacent parcels to be developed to maximize density, just like these nearby properties. So we did not elect to step back our building relative to the existing low-rise structures at this time. The overall design inspiration for the building is a cenote, which is an underground limestone cave or well that inspired the property owner while traveling. The project focuses on the juxtaposition of rigid and organic surfaces to emulate the experiential qualities of a cenote. You'll see we've included a small partie diagram for how we've organized the areas of solid and void to create a rhythm and break up the mass of the building as well. The outer facades of the building feature hard rectilinear volumes, while the curvilinear balconies with hanging plants in the center courtyard act as a carved-out void. We've also created a diagram on the bottom right corner of this sheet that demonstrates how the front facade meets the 50% build-to-line requirement per our discussion at the preliminary ARB meeting. Also, based on a comment at our last hearing about the north facade as viewed from 101, we've introduced a more dynamic breakup of regular vertical volumes punctuated with these glazed voids to present a bolder face to viewers approaching from the freeway to the north. The floor plans of the 6 floors of the building are featured here. Briefly, the first floor has commercial retail space. residential support and common areas, as well as assisted living residential units. The second floor features a community room, a dining hall, and central courtyard and assisted living units. The third and fourth floor plans are nearly identical and include a community room, gym, and the independent living units. Based on a concern expressed at our preliminary ARB meeting about co-locating different residential unit types on the same floor, we've separated them by locating all of the assisted living units on the first and second floors and all independent living units on the third and fourth floors. There will be 29 parking spaces in the underground parking area, 4 are commercial and 25 are residential. This exceeds the required parking for the uses of this structure, and there will be accessible EV charging and van EV charging spaces. There's also a bike room that provides 34 long-term bicycle parking spaces. On the ground floor, focusing first on the public-facing portion of the site, there's a special setback of 24 feet along San Antonio Road, 5-foot side setbacks, and a 10-foot rear setback. The project does include an easement alteration to increase the public sidewalk width along San Antonio Road by 3 feet to a new total of 12 feet wide. A trash staging area and curb cut loading zone, which could also serve as a pullout for quick deliveries or even a fire truck, are located along San Antonio Road. The new electrical transformer is located between the trash staging area and short-term bike parking spaces. At the primary entry, a short-term pickup drop-off parking stall with nearby exterior seating is located near the entrance to the underground parking garage. A path along the south side of the building is for residents and staff only to reach the additional 16 bike parking spaces in the first floor bike room, or reach elevator 2 to access the underground parking level bike room. Moving into the building, there are retail spaces on the ground floor that will be open to the public and provide resident-friendly retail, such as sundries and a coffee bar. These spaces shown in blue meet the 0.15 to 1 ground floor commercial requirement for mixed use in the Housing Incentive Program. 3 assisted living apartments and residential support spaces are located on this floor for residents who may have mobility impairment and would prefer a ground level unit. There's a redwood reflection garden plan for residents, which preserves the 2 significant redwoods on the property. The rear yard outdoor amenity area features a bocce ball court, lounge seating, and stormwater treatment areas, as well as raised garden beds to provide communal space for the senior residents to foster community. With this in mind, we've also provided communal living room and cafe lounge area for residents to read, gather, and watch facility-led movie nights on the projector wall. Support spaces in turquoise are primarily located on the north side of the main level, away from these uses. On the second floor, we have 9 more assisted living units shown in green. Amenities on this level include a communal dining room and community room to host gatherings for residents. There is a warming kitchen plan so that food prepared elsewhere can be heated and served to residents. Per this board's suggestion, we've also included a walking path on the second floor, shown by the dash line on plan for senior residents to get fresh air and sunshine. The third floor has 8 independent living units shown in yellow, plus a gym. And the fourth floor is nearly identical to the third floor, but with a community room for residents in place of that gym. On the roof, we're showing a schematic photovoltaic area, as well as the mechanical equipment screen, and rooftop garden area as accessed by stair 2 and elevator 2. The trash room and staging areas are illustrated on these enlarged plans and designed in compliance with the guidelines provided by Palo Alto Zero Waste. And both the independent living units and assisted living units include full residential kitchens, while the independent units feature balconies for private open space. The balconies have been tucked back into the unit footprints to provide the clear 5-foot setbacks requested at our preliminary ARB hearing. A few things to highlight in our building section. Underground parking and the ground floor level will consist of larger open spaces in concrete construction, while the upper 3 levels will consist of wood frame dwelling units that stack, with the exception of the second floor dining room space. The building height is 50 feet measured at the parapet, and the rooftop garden features a 10-foot tall trellis. In terms of fire access, there are areas of the site with restricted ground ladder access for emergency escape and rescue, so the project team is in conversation with Palo Alto Fire to determine the alternate means and methods for emergency access, as noted here on this plan. A focal point in the interior lobby is our sculptural cenote skylight. The section through this area shows how the feature will direct light from the central courtyard above down to the coffee bar below. Recessed planters in the skylight opening will complete the organic oculus effect of a cenote. And here we've included some typical details that show how the exterior materials will interface. At the front facade facing San Antonio, we are proposing to have a local artist design the screen at the primary entry portal as a means of incorporating the public art program requirements. This screen will have 24/7 visibility access to the public. Please note that the screen has not yet been designed, so the wood tone screen shown here on the front is merely a placeholder. Wood tone screens will, on the other hand, be featured on the east and south facades to provide privacy, soften hard edges, and vary the natural light at glazed walls. We've also increased the amount of wood look cladding on the project's ground level walls and the overhang soffits to lend natural warmth to the project's material palette per our preliminary ARB feedback. In these images, you can best see the established rhythm of solid and glazed portions meant to break up the massing and provide a private balcony at each independent living unit. Additionally, we've added off-white metal vertical louvered fins as a shading device for the floor-to-ceiling glass storefronts at the community room stack facing San Antonio Road. The second floor courtyard overlooks the ground floor redwood reflection garden. The curved balconies will feature hanging plants to soften the hard lines of the exterior and provide light filtering qualities. The C-shaped design of the building takes advantage of the southern exposure and views to Santa Cruz Mountains. And the overall design and choice of materials for this project is intended to appeal to senior residents who prefer a contemporary palette for their home. Wherever possible, we're using highly recyclable material selections with low embodied carbon. We've included exiting plans of all floors showing fire ratings of walls and occupancy separation tables if needed during the Q&A period, but we're going to run through those quickly now. And lastly, we've created some diagrams to demonstrate how the Palo Alto objective standards were incorporated into the project. In the interest of time, again, we won't go through them now, but they're here for reference if there are any questions about compliance. And we also have our landscape plans available if we want to go through those during Q&A. So thank you for giving us the opportunity to provide this presentation, and we look forward to hearing your comments.
Thank you very much for your clear presentation. Before we bring it back for questions, do we have any members of the public who wish to address us on this item?
I have no public comments.
No public comment. Okay, so we're going to go back to a round of questions from the board. We'll start with Board Member Adcock. You had started some questions that might have gone to the architect.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. And I guess another disclosure, Kate and I used to work together many years ago.
Thank you for that disclosure. That's not necessary, but appreciate it.
So yeah, thank you. It's a very interesting project and very well thought out. I'll start with a few questions actually on the first floor, and then I'll ask questions about the roof. Give me a sec. So on the, so I'm at your PA 7.2 sheet. So on the first floor, you have the dark blue retail areas, and then the living room, and then the back corridor for the residents towards the electrical room and all of that. Is the retail area supposed to be kind of, you know, it's public facing, anybody walking down the street can come in there. But then it goes into the living room area. How is the separation of, and is it intended to have a separation between residents and, you know, passersby on retail? And that question is also related to like how those retail, let's say staff get to the trash. Is it intended that they would access the same trash?
And Jody and Emily, remind me, do I just pipe in?
Yes, please.
Okay, great. Yeah, so the intent is that everything in the dark blue color is completely accessible to the public. We actually showed the area a little bit larger, but in working with our planner, we reduced that area to carve out, for example, the residential reception in the corridor leading to elevator 1 that would really be more resident facing. The intent is for the retail tenants to access the main trash room. That's a great point. That path could be clarified. We did kind of create the corridor from the assisted living and residential support spaces to the trash room to just keep that pathway separated from the lobby. But I agree, the retail path for trash could use some refinement. Anything shown in gray, like the living room, the leasing office, the mail room, those would all be resident-only spaces and would be accessed with some sort of access control, like a key card.
Thank you. And so I guess jumping up to,
Board Member Adcock, could I follow,
Sorry.
just do a follow-up on the retail? It's the same
Yeah.
question I have. I'd like to understand clearly that this blue shaded space in the drawing in front of us, all of that is keyed as retail space. And yet it looks to me like about half of it's the lobby for your building. So to the architects, how do you intend to keep that as retail space if it's also part of the private space for your building?
Yeah, so all of the blue area is completely accessible to the public. So that lounge seating is intended to be associated seating for the coffee bar, which would be open to the public. The lobby would all be completely open to the public as well. Similar to any other kind of retail, ground level retail space that's incorporated into a commercial development, say, it's really hard to tease out what part of the lobby is for that retail use and what part of the lobby is for the office workers heading up to their office above. This is a similar kind of negotiation that we've had with the planning department about the amount of area provided for retail.
So to the staff then, as I understand it, to a resident coming home, they're walking through a coffee shop, and that's okay. To so completely combine the lobby of the private building with the public's retail space. I just want to be sure that that's what our code is really intending them to do.
I would point out, I know that was a question for staff, but I would point out that stair 1 and elevator 1 are immediately accessed right inside the front door, and those both connect directly to the residential units.
So as I believe Emily said earlier this morning, this is our initial review of this project. We're still taking a deeper dive into this. I think there's certainly from the front door, there needs to be a path for residents that's not considered retail. But most of this area, I think we would be able to consider retail, but we can certainly refine that.
Okay, thanks for the clarification. Why don't you continue, Board Member?
actually, I have another clarification question now. On that same thing. So, and then this may be more for staff, like what is considered retail? Like, is the reception area going to the leasing office, which is, anybody trying to lease a space here is coming to that leasing office? Is that considered part of retail? No?
No, it is not, and that is why it is not classified as such on the plans. The leasing office is gray.
Yeah. So the long walkway, the lobby where nobody's selling anything, is that still considered retail?
Yeah, we're continuing to refine that. Because of the way the housing incentive program is set up, it's really important to have every square foot categorized as either residential or retail. And so when there are shared spaces like this, it's something that we're continuing to consider and have to figure out a little bit. Because it affects the calculation quite a bit.
Thank you. So I'll jump to my terrace questions. So probably either PA 11.6 or 7.6 are good places to look at it. I guess I'll go with 11.6, which is the code analysis on exiting roof plan. So looks like what you're accounting for, excuse me, I don't see a dotted line, but the roof garden, give me a sec, I can't read. But yeah, 654 square feet as R2 occupancy. Is that just the paved area? And because you're already up to 44 people in that area. And so how are you counting that area and confirming that you only need one way out of that roof garden area, given that anybody from the building can come up there? And also related question to that is, from the third floor, or second, any other floor, you can take the stair and the elevator and get up to that level. And I don't see kind of a boundary of like what is considered that assembly space
Mhm.
on the roof. How do you prevent people from, using all of the roof to have a party and
That's
only
a
have
great
one way
question.
out?
Yes, yeah. This area, correct that the area that we're counting as the occupiable space is the paved area. I agree that a boundary to kind of guide folks down the walkway toward that area would be a great addition. The 44 occupants came from the building department working with David Chung. He asked for an assembly unconcentrated at 15 square foot per person. However, I would add that the intent of this rooftop garden is to be for the owner's use only. So I'd love to get some clarification on the open space requirement for this, because that may change the way we design this and the calculus of that. I don't remember your last question, Board Member Adcock. Oh, why do we only need one exit? It's an assembly space with less than 50 occupants. So we typically, when we have rooftop gardens like this, we keep the occupant load under 50 to keep it down to one exit.
Sorry. But given I think I see that blue line in your boundary of what you're using for that 44 square feet seems to be kind of, minimizing how much area is actually used to get to that 44. So I would, urge you to, sharpen on that, because code wise, if every area that anybody can stand on that roof would be considered part of that space, or you have to at least account corridor at, 100 square foot per person or something. That will add to your 44 people and get you into trouble of the one exit.
Yep.
So yeah, thank you.
Thank
I
you.
might have more questions, but I'll pass it on to others for right
Fair
now.
enough. Okay, why don't we come back to Board Member Hirsch had some questions as well that seemed architecturally related. Board Member Hirsch?
So this is intended as a sort of a public and a private building. Can you describe a bit more how the residents on the ground floor get to their units, and do they therefore have to come through the public areas here for that? Or how do you distinguish that from the way you describe the private relationship to the upper floor units?
That's a great question. Yeah, currently the ground floor assisted living units would be accessed through the coffee bar.
Okay. They're not different from any other units in the building, are they?
They're not, no.
Okay. So access to the rear yard is with a bocce court or something like that, right?
Yes.
It is public, it is specifically unit used, right? I mean, by the people.
Just for residents.
Resident use. So they would come down the rear elevator to gain access to that
Correct.
space. How do people from the community have access to this building? I mean, have you thought about it as a commercial building? How do they get there to this building for the neighborhood?
Yeah, so we imagine that it'll be primarily accessed either from pedestrians on San Antonio Road. The front retail volume has its own double door entry, and then there's also the double door into the public lobby. And then there are 4 parking spaces in the basement level garage that are associated with retail. They're all located closest to stair 1 and elevator 1. So folks accessing it via car would come up stair 1 or elevator 1 to access the coffee bar and the 2 retail spaces.
Okay. Have you and the city discussed just the need for this amount of commercial open area? on this site? And what is it that your concept is here? I mean, is the draw the special space that you've created in the middle relative to the redwood trees and the open space facing south? And is that the intention, that that's going to be a draw for the community?
Absolutely. We think the cenote Oculus skylight is going to be, a beautiful space for everyone to gather. The commercial retail space on the ground floor is a requirement of it being mixed use as part of the housing incentive program. We have to have a 0.15 to 1 ratio of commercial retail floor area to the total floor area of the ground floor. So we don't have an option under the current code not to include the retail space.
Got it. Um,
Otherwise, we might configure it a little bit differently, but we understand the importance of mixed use.
Okay. You have quite a few community spaces. Could you describe how you intend to use those community spaces?
Absolutely. We have a wonderful senior living assisted living service provider who has joined the project since our last conversation with all of you. And he has really helped us refine the types of spaces that seniors like to use and use well in facilities like this. So originally we had kind of a separate darkened theater and reading room, and he encouraged us to combine that all into one big living room. He encouraged us to, make the projector wall work really well for movie nights. He helped us with the configuration of the dining room, beverage bar, and prep kitchen up on the second floor. He's actually trying to get us to expand the kitchen, so we'll see how that goes. But and then on the third and fourth floor, especially, he encouraged us to widen out the corridor along kind of as you approach the front facade along San Antonio on the left here, because he says they constantly organize games and just want a little bit more informal spaces for folks to, play chess, play cards. And so he was a big piece of us kind of widening that corridor and having a little bit more informal but indoor gathering space there.
So you have what, 2 community rooms, a dining room, a full-size dining room that's enough for the full capacity of the whole
Yes.
building. And describe a little bit of what the meal situation will be here.
Yeah, so the current intent of the project is for that, for the warming kitchen to warm meals that have been prepared off-site. And those would be served to residents 3 times a day, especially the assisted living residents.
So the intention is that you will provide those meals for them all the time, basically.
Yes, that's part of the, what folks are buying into when they come to live in this facility.
Uh-huh. But you are showing a full-size kitchen in each unit.
Yes.
So the alternative is they could cook at home if they so choose to, or in their unit.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Would you, this is a kind of a leading question, but would you have, if you had your druthers, would you have used this building that way, and the owner would have wanted to use it based on the requirements of the housing incentive program, that there is this amount of commercial space?
The owner is excited about providing some resident-friendly retail, like a little shop on the ground floor for folks to get sundries or snacks, or, if they need a new toothbrush or something. So I don't know if we would have quite the quantity of ground floor commercial space that's publicly accessible if we had our druthers. It is because the site is so narrow, it's a really high bar to meet that 0.5 to 1 ratio. Hence the rather tortured blue area of retail that you saw on the ground floor. If we had a wider site with more street frontage, it would be a lot easier requirement to hit. But we're perfectly willing to comply with the intent of the mixed use housing incentive program.
Well, just in general, how did the program develop this way? I'll be candid again. There's a very small number of residents here for the amount of public facility. Having dealt somewhat with seniors housing, usually it's a much more modest amount of public use space. So this is unusual in this regard, I think. So there actually, we'll get back to that maybe a little later, but the access to the community, how is that handled? I mean, have you discussed the issue of taking tenants out to outside activities rather than just the exciting ones that are going to be programmed for them within the building?
Yes. So one of the services that the service provider who's going to be running the independent living and assisted living programs offers is transportation, probably a shuttle service. It's part of the reason why it's so important for us to have that one ground level pickup drop off space, is so that that service can be pretty smooth.
So could you describe it? I mean, have you discussed how that is going to work with a van and picking up people, and how does that program work? I mean, is it going to be 10 people at a time, 5 people at a time, a larger van or smaller van? And how do they come in one exit and one entry, one exit, and they park in the front, and then there's the pickup area, is that this area that's kind of marked in the front with diagonals? How's that work?
Can you head to the ground floor plan, Athena? I don't have the details on the van service. I'd have to check in with our service provider and follow up with you. But yes, the space that has the diagonal striping and is marked as the pickup drop-off space there in front of stair 1 is the space that's intended for that shuttle service, as well as for any family members who might be picking up a resident to take them to appointments. And then we have a bench nearby right next to the double doors in the front under cover for folks to wait for that service.
Okay. Got it. Well, and then that the van sort of backs into, in order to get out of there, right? It backs into the parking access area and goes back out the one entry point.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yep.
Other than that, there is the street itself parking area? Is that access to the whole building for anybody, or?
The street parking, do you mean our curb cut at the front there?
Yeah, the curb cut.
Yeah, that's intended more for deliveries. There was a desire to have a curb cut for the trash truck adjacent to the trash loading zone. It would be an area for a fire truck to pull out in case of an emergency. We could certainly discuss the curb cut with city staff and fully intend to, but it's something in our conversation with various departments that felt like it would be desirable from a more utilitarian standpoint.
That more for retail and garbage pickup. In other words, that's what that is.
Yeah, or if someone's getting, a FedEx delivery, the truck could just pull in there rather than going all the way into the pickup drop-off space.
I think I noticed a note on there about the widening of San Antonio Road. Is that an intention for the whole street here, or is that did I misread something?
The widening of the sidewalk?
Probably that.
I think staff can answer that question.
Yeah, so San Antonio Road has a special setback, and there's been discussion about, if any of that special setback space may be used in the future to improve bicycle infrastructure or something like that. It would not be to widen any drive aisles of the road.
Okay, yeah. So, we have for long been discussing the San Antonio and bicycle issues, and the concern for bicycles, has that come up in the discussion so far about the program for this building?
We haven't had an in-depth discussion with the Office of Transportation, but I would welcome a conversation with them about this.
Yeah, okay. Let's see if I have anything written down here. Well, I think you Thank you. Most of my questions were programmatic, and I think you've answered those pretty well. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Board Member Hirsch. Anyone else with questions for the applicant? Go ahead, Board Member Chen.
Hi, so I have a couple of questions for the circulation as well. So for the trash staging area, how can you get access from the trash room to the refuse staging area? Is it go through the side yard and to the front sidewalk? And how do you put the trash bin there?
Correct. Yeah. So facility staff will be taking the trash from like down the side yard through. That's why we have a double gate there. And then across the parking spot, that's actually a zero curb parking space. We just have bollards. So it'll be a level surface for them to roll the bins all the way out to the staging area. And that's where they would be staged for the Palo Alto, trash hauler to come pick up the bins. And then facility staff would put them away as well.
Thanks. And I noticed there are two bike rooms. One is down at the basement and the other is on the ground level. Are they designed for different groups of people?
Yes, we originally had all of the bike parking down in the underground basement level. I think it was actually based on a comment at our preliminary ARB that because it is senior residence, it would be advantageous to have some of that bike parking pulled up to the ground floor. And we agree. So we provided the first floor level bike room for folks to be able to access either from the exterior or if they're rolling it through the lobby, we provided a door there for them to be able to park up on the ground floor without having to go all the way down to the basement. So the basement bike parking, we imagine being more for either facility staff or for the retail staff.
Okay. And could you please clarify the short-term bicycle parking? Because it seems like on the site plan, on the architectural site plan, it is in front of the retail, but on the landscape plan, it's between the lobby and retail space.
Oh, that's an item we need to fix. Our intent was to have it in front of the retail, but we will work with our landscape architects on that. I have to admit there was a lot of manipulation with the when we found out all the requirements about the trash staging area and the electrical transformer location. There was a lot of adjustment of where that short-term bike parking should go. So we can confirm that on the next round.
Thanks. And could you please clarify whether tree 12 will stay or it will be removed? It's at the backyard.
Athena, can you go to the tree removal plan in landscape?
Yeah, because the underground parking, it shows the tree protection zone for that tree, but the landscape, it shows removed.
Okay, we will confirm that. I would be tempted to say that it's going to be removed because landscape is the greater authority on that, but we'll check our underground parking.
Okay. And so on the upper level for the owner's unit and the unit below, the decorative metal screen is in front of the bedroom unit, it's in front of the bedrooms. So does the windows meet the egress requirement? How does the metal screen work? Is it removable or?
Yeah, so we have several areas on the site that don't meet the emergency escape and rescue requirements. So we actually are going to have an entire set of alternate means and methods that we're working through with the Palo Alto fire team to make sure that everyone can exit the building safely.
Okay, thank you.
Board Member Rosenberg, any questions?
Yes, hi. Thank you for your presentation. It was exceedingly clear and concise. So I sincerely appreciate you guys taking the time and effort on that.
Thank you.
I'm going to start with some of the ground level exterior items. Hopefully we can run through them pretty quickly. First of all, this loading and unloading parking space that you guys have designated right near the front entrance, is that an ADA space and is it required to be?
It is not any part of our required parking count. All of the required parking is downstairs in the basement, and that's where all of our code compliant ADA parking is. This would also qualify as a code compliant ADA space, and we could certainly designate it that way. But our intent is to leave it open for everyone because it is intended for that, family member or shuttle
Right.
service pickup and drop off. But the access aisle, we know we're going to have folks with mobility impairments here, so why
Yes.
not design it to be an accessible space?
Wonderful. Zooming in on this same area, I'm looking at this. Hang on, let's see if I can mark this up. My annotate, there we go. All right, so zooming in a little bit, looking at this space here.
So cool.
Okay, it's not quite working the way I wanted. That's not the right space. There. Okay, so this space right here, if we can zoom in on that for just a second. So it looks like this area running along here is those dimple paving. What is this dimension here?
That's a great question. I do not know that off the top of my head. It looks like it's maybe 3 feet.
Okay. Yeah, I just would want to make sure that we've got that at an appropriate size so that somebody doesn't have to go over the dimpling if they don't want to. For example, someone in a walker may not enjoy crossing that pathway, especially if it's just a corner of their means of egress. Thank you for the zoom in. You can zoom back out. I appreciate that.
So maybe kind of radius or chamfer that. Okay. Yep.
Yeah, just to keep an eye on what that dimension is. You do also have these two, you've got an existing transformer and an existing high voltage and electrical vault. Will those remain or will those be removed?
My understanding is that those will remain, but we can work through that with CPAU.
And so in addition to that, you're required to have this new transformer that's currently designed behind the garbage staging.
Yes, and the reasoning for its positioning is really the view triangles from the adjacent driveway on the neighbor to the south. Their view triangles eat up quite a bit of that front area. So between not blocking the retail and lobby entrances and allowing for that drop-off parking space off of the main drive, truly this, and not being under the cantilevered floors above, this is like the only spot on site for that new transformer to go.
Appreciate that, and I understand.
Yeah.
Additionally, you have a dashed box here that says new transformer backflow, et cetera, tucked behind screen planting and monument sign ideally. So am I to understand that you're going to have 3 spaces for electrical transformers? That feels...
No, we should delete transformer from that note because that's originally we thought it would fit there, but clearly you can see it does not.
Understood. Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that's all my front yard questions. I'm going to move into the space itself at this point. The retail, is there any possibility that those 2 retail spaces could be combined into one large retail unit?
I don't see why not. Our owner had a desire to have 2 different tenants in there, but there's no, code or architectural reason why they couldn't be combined.
Okay. And now the bike room placement, while I understand that, we had specifically requested that there was bike storage on the ground floor, that does feel like the spacing or like the placement of it might be a little bit, A, it's taking up some of that cenote view that you guys have, this beautiful corridor. And then B, it feels a little odd to have to walk through the front doors, past the coffee shop to get your bike in there. So I was curious if you had any more comment on that bike placement.
Sure. Our primary intent is actually for it to be accessed via the side yard. There would be an auto opener on the gate and on the door, kind of pointing toward the redwood reflection garden for folks to access it from the exterior. And then once they've dropped off their bikes, they use that other swing door to access the kind of coffee bar area.
Got it.
Yeah. Now we did have for a long time the bike room right up against the building facade, and it just really seemed to do a disservice to the lobby and the retail to have it located so front and center, which is why it did get positioned kind of back behind that retail. Again, we just have such a narrow street frontage on this project that it's been a real puzzle.
Yeah. Something's got to give. Okay.
Yeah, we thought the bike room should be the thing that would give, but we love bikes.
And moving on to just in terms of functionality of the space, is there going to be a security door in this zone? Is that sort of I understand public versus private, but is there a need for security for the assisted living units? Is it a locked unit? Is it?
Yeah, that will have access control on that door.
Access control, perfect. Thank you. Do you mind going up to the second floor at this point? So you had mentioned that maybe there's the possibility for an expansion of a kitchen. Since there are 2 community rooms, is there any intent that this community room may end up as a kitchen space? Or is that like absolutely a hard no?
That is a very clever guess, and yes, that's where we're talking about moving.
Got it.
If we expand the kitchen, it would move into that community room space.
Okay. In terms of, again, back to security, since this is the assisted living area, is this also going to be an access point where they need to have a key card to get out there?
That's an interesting question. We have a locked gate down at the bottom of the podium stairs, stair 3, that's a straight run out to the street. Given that you would need kind of resident only access to get up to this floor in any way, I don't think that we were intending to have a special access control between the courtyard and the corridor.
Okay.
But we could consider it.
No, just a question.
Yeah.
Okay, up to the next floor level. Oh, sorry, stay here for 1 second. I have one more question here. This area here, that's not an accessible balcony, but you're gonna pave it anyway. Is there any possibility that this would like shift down into that space? Or is that, if you don't mind me just asking, what are you doing here?
Certainly. Yeah, that's a great question. There was a strong desire, both from the service provider and from the owner, for the assisted living units to not have balconies as a safety risk.
Understandable, right?
These floors stack, and structurally it really helps us when the residential units stack, which is why the exterior wall is where it is and why we were not planning to jog it. There's certainly an option where we just don't have floor plate there at all. And then we just have that kind of the turned C-shaped wall continue down to kind of continue to create that rhythm across the facade, but it's just a void.
Yep, not a problem. Just wanted to understand it.
Yeah.
All right. Floor 3 would be great. I'm trying to get through this quickly. I apologize for taking the extra time here. Okay, so floor 3. So this one here, again, so Yingxi covered those items, so you've already discussed that. This one's going to be a little bit of I apologize for this comment, because last time when we spoke, we had talked about keeping those balconies out of the setbacks. Now, to meet the minimum space requirement, those balconies would need to be 6 feet deep. They're currently 5 feet. Is that correct?
Yes.
But all of those actually could jog out a foot to hit that setback line and meet your 6 feet. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Just wanted that clarification.
If you're okay with it, we're okay with it.
Okay, good to know. I think that was it on this level. And then rooftop, please. Yeah, and board member Adcock covered everything here that I had. Lastly, would you mind jumping over to the front elevation rendering, something that we can see the exterior and the materiality? So the new white color you had labeled as a Zurich white, do you by any chance have the LRV of that white color?
We can find it for you.
It doesn't list the LRV. Yeah. So it's one of those that just previously we've been kind of sticklers for making sure that things aren't too white. We don't want to blind people as they're driving down the street. So if that's something that you guys could provide at some point, that would be great.
Absolutely.
Now, I did notice that the FP1 and the PT1, those two are very similar in this warm, chalky sort of cream color. It's a little bit less white. It's much more creamy. The metal fins are very white. Is there an alternative that we could look at those for those metal fins, or is that really, are there limited colors for those metal fin panels?
No, the metal fin panels can be customized and they would match that. We could have them match the more creamy Zurich white.
Okay. All right, I think that is all my questions for now. And I would also like to just, as a comment, the renderings of this one are extremely helpful because of the angles that you have. When you see it in elevation, everything does feel very sort of flat, and you really understand this building much better in the 3D renderings. So we appreciate that. All right, thanks very much for your time.
Oh, the LRV is 76.
Beautiful, thank you very much.
Questions?
I do have, do you have any questions? Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm going back to your first floor plan on PA 7.2. As you've also said, the whole plan is quite tortured with all your retail requirements. So I'm wondering, from the second floor courtyard, you have the stair 3, which seems problematic in several ways, and correct me if I'm wrong. But if I go to your egress plan on 11.1, I think, yeah, nope, 11.3. So you are egressing the entire courtyard plus some of the dining through just one exit down that stair 3. And you're not egressing people into the building into stairs 1 or 2, which might have to do with, keeping the doors locked and all of that. But then you're, shoving stair 3 there for that purpose, which kind of hurts your frontage, your floor plan on the first floor quite a bit. And so, yeah, I was just wondering, is there a reason why you're doing that? And also, what's the code justification for egressing everybody down one stair from the courtyard when you have more than 50 people?
Yeah, that's a great question. Stair 3 is also for fire access to the podium from the street level. So it's serving a dual purpose. There is a code stipulation that outdoor areas exclusively in service of residents of a residential space need only have one means of egress. I think the logic there being that only the residents who already live in the building would be out on the podium. So that's why we're kind of showing a worst case code scenario for folks to exit down the stairs. If desired, we certainly could revise the egress path to show some of those folks going out the door to the north or to the east and exiting down stair 2 and, well, not really elevator 2, but stair 2. However, those occupants would all end up then downstairs in the same egress court going out basically the same side yard as they would going down stair 3. So it's a wash either way in terms of how they're getting out of the building and down to San Antonio Road.
So if I may, I just want to clarify that the building department will be reviewing this plan set they already have, and they will continue. But this is an early plan set, so some of these things have not been fully fleshed out. But we do have a building department that will be reviewing those exiting aspects.
Yeah. And they might have very similar comments. I have 2 other questions. One is about the deliveries for this upstairs kitchen, whether it's, a warming kitchen or, cooking kitchen. Are all the supplies coming through elevator 1 and stair 1 that is also shared by residents?
Yes.
Okay. And my other question is about the garage in the basement. So from San Antonio view, it's basically an open access into the garage, and I don't see any gates or anything downstairs either. Is that intentional, that anybody can be in the basement parking area at any 24 hours a day?
Yes, because it's also the commercial parking.
Okay. It seems like the residents may not be so happy about that, but you have your parking counts to meet. So, yep, thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to press in with staff a little bit. Actually, it seems to me that some of the requirements of the city are making this project really arduous. Specifically, the requirement for so much retail space. Is there other options or other ways the city could look at this to help them cut that required square footage down?
You can answer or I can.
So this is the zoning required by the CS zoning district and the housing incentive program zoning. So as far as I know, the only alternative would be to do a PHZ project, planned home zoning, planned community. It's a significantly more intensive process than this being major architectural review. Yeah, or a zoning text amendment to change some of these requirements.
So there's no variance process, just that they could just apply for it.
No, a variance would be for a hardship based on the property. As far as I know, we've typically only done variances for single family houses. Okay. Yeah.
So so a PHZ is the only way they could do this then.
Or to change the code via text amendment.
Well, changing the code is too arduous as well, but
Yes, they're both very complicated processes. A variance, we wouldn't be able to make the findings for a variance.
same thing applies to the questions of trash collection and electrical generator quantities and locations. I'm assuming these are just coming straight from these two bureaucracies within the city, the trash agency and electric utilities, but they're clearly having a significant impact on the design of the building. And is there any way to get some relief from those strict requirements? Or what is the process to do that?
I mean, are you talking about relief from electric utility standards in terms of the sizing of the transformer and stuff? So, there's not really a process for that. We
Well,
have
you could put the
pretty set
transformer in the basement, for example. It could be located there. It's a question of what servicing space is required. So they would have to relax their servicing requirements somewhat, but it is possible. It's done in other towns.
Yes, so Palo Alto has its own utility. So we are, as a city, able to make up our own regulations. And planning is in communications with utilities on a regular basis about things of this nature. But we have, utilities has made a decision to put transformers in easily accessible areas for it to be easily accessible, also for it to be safer for their workers. There are a lot of safety concerns as well. So planning has pushed back where they can. Direction to the kind of direction that you're talking about would need to really come from council.
Council. And I mean, I guess I'm really looking, what does the applicant have to do to push back on these things? Because it becomes, I guess, the applicant pushing on the utility department, and you're saying it's just going to go to council for direction.
The applicant's going to talk to utilities, and utilities is going to say that they need to have safe, easy access to these facilities.
And the same question applies to the trash collection process. If you just wheeled those trash bins out and left them at the left side of that entrance ramp to the garage, the garbage truck could easily back into there and pick them up. As I understand it, they don't want to go off public property to pick up the trash bins. So that requires or forces the whole thing we're seeing, which these trash bins in front of the building wheeled in an unwieldy fashion. And that's really coming from a trash collection requirement.
We have contracts with collection agencies that say that the drivers will only go, 25 feet onto the property. Otherwise, there's additional charges and things. There's also the safety of the workers, getting out of their trucks on major streets and things like that. So that's what our zero waste team is thinking through as they make these regulations.
So if the applicant chooses to push back on that, again, it's them negotiating with the trash collection people. We're not negotiating. They're not in a position to negotiate, just trying to persuade them that it's okay to do it differently.
We have a zero waste team that's part of the city that they would be working with.
Okay. One last question, slightly different, is regarding the parking. I understand there's 4 designated commercial parking spaces. Would that allow this almost 3,000 square feet of retail to actually have any food service type of businesses there? And if not, what number of parking spaces would be required?
So the zoning allows for the first 1,500 square feet of the retail to not be parked. Unfortunately, I have to directly ask Jody a question right now, which is,
Please do, it's okay.
can the cafe use be included in that? Or since the parking requirement is higher for that, does that need to be separate?
I understand why you would need to ask that question.
Okay, we're talking about a detail that I'm not prepared to answer at this moment, but again, we're early in the process of this project. We need to clarify that they have sufficient parking. There is the possibility of shared parking, but we would need probably a TDM report or something similar to ensure that shared parking would actually work, and that we could then do a director's adjustment for parking. But that, and Emily's question was, that there is an exemption for the first 1,500 square feet. Can that be applied to the retail, or could it be applied to an eating and drinking establishment? There's different parking requirements for those. And so, one would be a bigger reduction than the other. And that I will need to go back and think through.
Thank you. But refresh my memory if you could. If we have, say, 3,000 square feet of retail, this for round numbers, of which 1,500 is exempt, and there's 1,500 that does need to be parked. And so the ratio is, what ratio is being used to come up with those 4 spaces? 1 to 400, maybe, something
I
like that?
believe we have a calculation on the cover sheet, Athena. If not, we can look it up.
And
The regular retail is 1 per 200. As noted, we're working with the applicant through the parking calcs. It's, not.
Yeah, I'm just trying to
Yeah.
understand what the ramifications will be. The question really is going to be, what will the ratio be for a food service establishment? And it's usually 50, isn't it?
I also can just state
Or-
there's not a strong appetite from, no pun intended, from the owner to do a food service establishment, just due to all of the kind of public health, grease interceptor, other requirements that come along with that. There's also higher burden on the trash area, which is already, as you can see, taking up a large amount of square footage on the ground floor. So parking would almost be the least of our worries with a food service establishment on the ground floor.
Thank you. Yeah.
So I see the concerned look. Coffee shops, many times, if you're talking about kind of the Starbucks version of a coffee shop, those are considered food retail, and so go under our retail definition.
I see. Thank you. Okay, well, I think my questions are driving towards what I'm going to be concerned about, but let's bring this back to the board for discussion. Do we have any more questions to specifically go to? Who'd like to start with some comments about this project? Board Member Adcock, are you looking at me so nicely, or no? Board Member Hirsch, you want to get started?
I've talked a lot, so your turn.
I'm gonna start. I'm really concerned about this retail space, because it's not. There's really about 1,000 square feet of retail in those 2 storefronts there. The rest of this is the lobby for the building. It's designed and will be used that way. I'd be very surprised if functioning, this building would allow them to leave that entire lobby open to the public on a regular basis, especially with an assisted living facility right behind it. I'm really dismayed with the city setting such standards that make this really difficult for the building to work. I've pointed out with my questions on numerous places, we're not making it easy for these folks. We're making it so challenging. It's like every time they want to put in a good building, here it is, meet these increasingly stringent requirements. There's no way to fit 3,000 square feet of retail on a site this wide with a ramp down plus an entrance. It just goes on and on. We need to relax the retail standard. And if we're saying the only way they can do it is to get a text code amendment change, that's such a high burden. So I don't know what to say, but it's disappointing to me that we don't have a way to do this. I feel the same thing with the trash collection very strongly. Those bins really could be left on the left side facing the building of the drive aisle to be picked up and collected there. It just makes so much more sense to keep them out of the front of the building. So I just wanted to put that out there as my starting comment on this project. And I don't know if anybody else wants to chime in on that or go forward from there. Board Member Rosenberg.
I'm going to chime in that for the purposes of this review of this project, I think they are adequately showing an appropriate amount of retail space. While I completely support Board Member Baltay's comments that it is too restrictive, I think they have found an appropriate solution to the problem. I do think that this coffee shop will be utilized as a retail space. I do think that people will want to go there. And I think that actually having that intermingling of senior facility and sort of vibrancy is a wonderful thing. So I would respectfully, I support your commentary. I would also respectfully say that I think this this project is complying with that to the best that they are able to at this time. Do I wish that they didn't have to push that boundary so hard? Absolutely. But I think this meets it. So for what it's worth, I think that they've done an excellent job of torturing out an appropriate amount of space, to use your own word. So I think that this is a wonderful thing. And I think that it's beneficial to have a little bit of the crossover between the public and the seniors. You don't want to tuck seniors away for them never to be seen, right? They need interaction, they need vibrancy, they need liveliness. And I think that this is a really exceptionally thought out way of trying to solve a lot of problems in a very clever way. Again, I'm going to circle back and say I fully support everything Peter said. And moving forward with other projects, I can see why this would be more complicated. But I do want to commend the architects here for their really thoughtful work in trying to find a very elegant solution to a very complicated problem.
I'd like to kind of jump in on part of that because I'm a senior. So I would say that not all seniors would agree with you on that. You know, that they might not enjoy always having that many younger, louder people listening to different music, you know. So, but yes, and then perhaps where do you go to get it? Do you get it in your home, or do you get it by going to commercial areas where there's a mix of all the time of ages? But in particular, this, I think there ought to have been, when the rules were created here, some consideration of the size and use of the facility in deciding that there should be or should not be commercial in a building like this. You could imagine if the space were compressed more, maybe there could be more garden space, more open space on this site. It's a very tight site. And to have made that decision that it has to have commercial space, it's kind of unfortunate here that it takes up so much space. I don't want to go on from that. I just would like, this is really relative to Chair Bolte's comments that he finds it to be something that is too restrictive here and a problem, and I agree with that. And I agree with it also because if you know San Antonio Road, there's going to be a greater density of housing on it, no doubt. But will they want to use this place for their coffee shop? Is this the right place for something like that? Seemed to me that, and it seems to me that's a kind of a lack of planning for San Antonio Road. They really need a shopping center, sort of a midtown type shopping center for that whole street, you know, for that whole area. The density is going to be much, much greater here coming up. And splitting it up into a lot of little commercial pieces of the housing buildings, to me, is ridiculous. So that law is badly written, very badly written, and should not ever have that much impact on all those housing buildings. Those housing units, you know, they're much better if you have good things for the tenants themselves right within those buildings, rather than commercial. Commercial should be kept outside, as it normally is in communities, in shopping centers and small, wonderful little places that you can go to and get many things at the same time, including potential eating facilities. Okay, but that will affect ultimately our opinion. So it's worth finding out who agrees with this opinion.
Absolutely. Who else is? Board Member Adcock, your light is on.
Yeah, kind of related to that. While, yeah, square footage math, you've made it work with the blue. If I were a resident there, I'm not a senior yet, but racing to it.
No, you are.
Like in that beautiful, redwood reflection garden, if there weren't whoever down the street sitting in the living room, not the living room, but coffee bar seating area, would a resident want to just sit out there and sunbathe, right? It's kind of like, it doesn't feel like their private garden if the whole blue is wrapping around it. The coffee bar, while it's a nice idea, I don't know how it functions with where's the storage, where's the supply, how is all of that working out in the middle of that space? And yeah, it seems like, I don't want to redesign your project for you. But like, if you can push more of the blue towards the front, like, get the mail, the Erks room, all of that towards the back so that you can kind of have your right end of your plan, the blue, more for residents and have a more privacy to your redwood garden and then the terrace above. Seems like, between that and stair 3, which I'm still not quite sure you need it right there. I think there's ways to push more of that required commercial towards the street to make the residents feel more private once they get into their space.
Since I'm going to say we're sort of going at this in a haphazard fashion because I started with this sort of white elephant in the room kind of issue, but go ahead, Board Member Chen.
Yes, overall, I think this project is really creating a luxury living style in this space. Lots of outdoor space and lots of good common space for each of the floor. And for the retail down below, I kind of agree with Vice Chair Rosenberg. I think it's nice to bring more people into the building to make it more lively. And also depends on the nature of the business. It doesn't need to be like for all the retails and business. It doesn't need to be like all creating loud noises. It could be appropriate for the seniors. And also, just as the applicants mentioned, it could be a convenience store so that when they need to have something immediately, they can just go downstairs and get it. So I think that makes sense. And I think the applicant find a smart way to solve the problem and kind of meet the requirement of the commercial. And maybe we can also ask the applicant whether they want to, whether they felt it's too restricted to them to require such large commercial space, or it's a good add-on for this project.
Yeah, I guess I'd like to encourage the applicant to consider going through the PHC process instead and just really petition for what you're actually going to do. I'm just, to my colleagues, skeptical that this swath of retail coffee bar space ever will actually be that. I mean, you know how these buildings actually function. And once they're done with planning and they've got their permits, and 2 years into this, and the residents are constantly complaining about people marching through their lobby.
Agreed.
It just won't.
And how do you even
real.
find this coffee place like this far deep into a senior living building? What's the financial, like, who's going to go shop in that interior store if it's just somebody buying toothbrush once a month? Is that viable? Doesn't seem like a good use of square footage.
It's not.
Yeah.
They're doing this because they're trying to meet this 3,000 square foot requirement with the code. They're just painting
Just a
something on the
giveaway,
plans to
really,
make it past planning judgment. And
Yeah.
we're all sitting here nodding our heads at it rather than just saying what it is.
Yeah.
Telling them instead, apply for the 1,000 square feet that would be great for the community to have, that you really do have on your building.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe change that side staircase so you can widen the frontage to help the retail.
Yeah.
And let the lobby be the wonderful lobby for the residents. As it's shown, it would be a fantastic space for the residents to have movie night, to have a private coffee bar or cocktail bar at night, to have a redwood garden that's uplit with the C note. All of this is fantastic design stuff.
Yeah.
It really is a luxurious senior living project here. And we're just sort of paying lip service to this retail requirement. Fine, if that's what we have to do. It's embarrassing for the city to require this kind of thing and then pay lip service to it when it's not happening because we can't somehow make our laws let them do what they really need to do, which is what they're going to do anyway. I'm sorry to rail on, but you know. it
Well,
just-
the reality is that the commercial won't work. That's the point here. And that even is, as you say, even the coffee shop really won't work. It is nice to think of it as a wonderful space. And yes, for the tenants, the idea of this carving out this building in this way is quite exciting, you know, to do it around a piece of nature for the people who live there. They will get a lot out of it, but that it will, you know, that it will attract the business, I can't imagine at all. That it will attract the business for a cup of coffee even, I don't even imagine that. You know, why would you come here for that? It's just doesn't make sense. Yeah, maybe you do. You frequently go to a coffee shop because it's kind of exciting socially as well. But I don't think you know, think of it the other way. It's nice for the seniors to have a mix. But do young people want to go where the seniors are? Turn it around, ask that question. But, you know, it clearly isn't going to work as a building just because the regulation says it must be there. And that's the only reason it really is there. It isn't going to functionally bring enough money into this. And by the way, if, for 28 people or however many residents are, do we create a commercial place specifically for them in their building? What's the use of that? Probably you would end up with machines in there. You put your money in and you get your toothbrush. Is that really an attractive, interesting commercial place? I would think that actually the tenants would like to be taken to a little shopping center somewhere in their little van. And this is day out to go buy your whatever you need within the community. And their needs might be quite more extensive than just what is right there in the machine.
Okay, I started this. I'm going to stop it. Let's
Wait,
focus.
Can I pose a question really quick to my fellow board members?
Sure, go ahead.
First, I'm trying to understand. If we did not shade this coffee bar and sitting area and lobby lounge flex, if that was just not shaded blue, would there be an objection with the design? Is it really just the fact that we have to call it retail? Is that the objection? Is the objection that anyone could come in there? Or is it that there's a fault with the design? I'd love to hear everyone's thoughts on that.
Oh, yes, it is the question. We haven't been talking about the design at all of the building. And I think we really need to, the facade design and the planning design.
We're going to get to that, but let's respond to board members Rosenberg's question.
I mean, the building is sprinklered with the community spaces, and this would be one of them. And like you were saying, whether it's a bar or a coffee bar, that it becomes, you know, facing the garden, which is much nicer than the community room upstairs, really, that's looking out to the street. If that could be an amenity to the building residence itself, it would be much more lovely thing for the residents to have than a place for somebody to come buy a $6 cup of coffee 2 times a day. You know, how many people down the street are actually going to come buy coffee there? But at the same time, it wouldn't be an attractive place for the residents.
Very
If
much so.
it's, you know, you have a full-on kitchen in your apartment, why would you go downstairs to buy coffee? Right? Yeah.
I would say, why do we all go to Starbucks? Right?
Yeah, but we don't go every day, you know, and to make this viable for 28 residents, everybody would have to go 3 times a day to make that commercially viable business.
But isn't that an argument for keeping it public? Right? Isn't that the exact argument for why this should be a public space, is to make sure that that coffee bar is viable? Because if that coffee bar is serving 28 people a day and their guests, let's not forget that they'll have visitors, they'll have, you know, their grandkids coming by, they'll have these moments where maybe they don't want 3 children running around their apartment. And so they all meet here, right? So this is a really again, I want people to answer my question before I dive too far into it, but I guess just to
But if it
question that
was,
is.
yeah, to your point, like if it was a place that's within the private zone of the shared private zone of the residents, that living area, with all those couches would be great for you to hang out with your grandkids, right? And there could be a coffee bar there that staff could, have coffee pots or make something that's, available just like the upstairs dining area versus being a commercial place that somebody pays for every cup of coffee. It's a completely different dynamic of how that place would get used. Whether it's, anybody you don't know coming and sitting next to you versus your 28 community and their families.
Board Member Rosenberg, think of it this way. I've got my elderly father's in the ground floor assisted living in the back. And I really care for him and I want to be sure he's in a protected and safe environment. And right now with this design, there's one double door with some sort of key access is the only thing protecting him from any stranger walking into his apartment. And I don't think that's a functionally acceptable design. And my guess is my father and everybody wouldn't buy that. So when you say, is this design okay the way it is? The physical structure of the design is great, but the notion that you're making this use this deep into the building is not. I'm trying to paint sort of the security aspect of that. That's common on any of these assisted living facilities, the need for security and a perception of security. That door won't be locked all the time. The residents will forget to lock it or they'll go in and out and it's just it's too tight, it's too much and it doesn't work, no. So the way it's presented as retail space, no, it does not function. And there's not a geometric change, a change to the architecture, so to speak, it's a change to the use or the specified use. And to me, it's a change to the entitlement process because we're just not being honest with ourselves. Can we? Okay, Board Member Chen, she wants.
Speaking of the security issues, concerns that you just mentioned, so does it mean like the main entrance as the actual gate or the reception is like an actual layer for protection or to make whoever live in this unit feel safer compared to just one single door or one double door between the coffee shop and their units? Okay.
I want to walk in, say hi to the receptionist who I know because that's where my dad lives. Oh, how's dad doing today? Oh, he's great. He had a good night. I want to have that sense of this is the home. That's what I'm paying all this money for.
And that's very typical of senior living spaces where there's a receptionist and you check in and, they know that you're a family member who's going to go up to the third floor to this apartment. But I don't know what that receptionist is doing in the front. If anybody, is going right by to the coffee shop and then to your point, the double door on the end, it may be locked, but if somebody's going through, anybody can go behind them and, most people are polite and hold the door for other people, and they'll, the receptionist is so far forward beyond that they won't see that somebody who shouldn't be going back there is going through those double doors. It seems to be a security concern as well. And at a minimum, that reception desk maybe should go further back where there is visibility to where people are going. But then again, stair one becomes unmonitored. So it's hard to figure out what's the right place for it that staff can make sure that people who are not supposed to be going up the stairs are going up the stairs.
I'd like to kind of add another piece of information to this. The coffee shop where the Blue Water Coffee is in the what used to be the library, and I guess it was a theater at one point. What's the name of that?
I mean, Blue Note Coffee on University Avenue?
Yeah,
It's
on
got the large
University,
open
yeah.
court. It used to be the
The
theater.
courtyard is fantastic. You go there for the courtyard for the casual You go inside for different other eating eating there, stuff that you can buy inside. And of course, there's the commercial, all of those people who are going into the office spaces now that are inside. That's a great place for a coffee shop mixed with the other uses there. This is not the right place for that. And so once you've eliminated that, there's a whole other possibility that will, I think, affect the rest of the design in this building as well. It frees up that space for other uses.
Let me pose a question. Again, sorry, I've got two minds of this. So it seems to be that the biggest concern about this coffee bar at this moment is that it doesn't feel like it's private for the people who are going to be in this building, which the architect is claiming is not intended to be. There's a safety concern with reception, right? So where the reception's located right now, if someone's going into stair 1 or elevator 1, they are greeted by reception. Sorry, I didn't mean to note that. If there was a door right there, right, then reception is meeting everybody that's going to both private spaces. But that means that the only real public space is here. That's it. Everything else would be private, which maybe is the right solution, right? But I guess my secondary question is, if these units aren't on the first floor, if they're up on the second floor, right? And this is, I don't know, maybe this is the community kitchen for the residents. Maybe the kitchen actually comes down to the first floor. If those are not on this ground floor, nobody is walking through here to get there. And everything is solved by coming right here up to reception. And then this area could stay nice, open, and public. Does that make logical sense to you guys as well? Is the concern the fact that you have to sort of walk through here to get to these 3 units? Because everybody else is going to go through that. It's right there at reception. It's right there at the entry. It's 3 units are causing this sort of chaos on the ground floor.
It leads to like, who are the outdoor open spaces for in that case, right? Whether it's the Redwood Garden or the outdoor open on the east side. If that's all commercial space, then it's probably going to be, if there's a cafe in the far back, then it'll be outdoor seating for that cafe. It's kind of, and this goes back to the zoning of, is the required outdoor space, is that required for the use of, or, private to the residents? I think so, right?
Yeah, it would be for the residents. I mean, you could have some sort of like key card access to that, but I mean, I think we hear your thoughts about just the design and how it's kind of designed around it, and does it make it feel private?
Right.
But it isn't. I think it is intended to be private, but Fora, Architects Fora can respond to that.
Oh, sorry. Do you want a response?
I don't think we should talk anymore about this issue. We have the whole building to review still, and this really isn't even in our control. We're talking about a planning issue that planning and whatever is going to have to get to. So with all respect, Board Member Rosenberg, if we can just sort of let it go for now.
Let
We'll
it
look at this
live for
again.
now.
Okay, I don't want to.
Grumpily, I will
I'm not trying
agree.
to shut you off, and your points are well made, and there's clearly a lot to discuss, but why don't we talk about the
Okay.
roof deck? Is that something else that we have opinions on? Perhaps,
Looking at Board Member Adcock for that one.
I'm looking at her, but David's got his light on. Did you?
Well, and I'm hoping we will talk about the planning of the whole building as well.
Talk about the planning of the whole building. I talk about anything but the retail use.
Well, I agree with that. So let me talk a little bit about the planning of the whole building. Because a lot of things happen when you're required to follow these kind of instructions about what goes into a building like this. I think that the fact is that the owner of this building has, whatever the program has been, quite varied. And I gather that you designers have kind of spoken to people who have added to the possible program as well. But I see a conflict. I'm sort of, when I was an architect, interested in the kind of planning that was economic enough to work and satisfy certain conditions. And I happen to think that the that the second floor plan is really so much clearer, rational, and makes sense to me. And also has this kind of relationship to the open space in the middle. And that when you get up in the building, then all of a sudden, because there's this jog in the building, there's a residential in the front of the building. Whereas if the building from the ground floor up were able to have all of that look a lot more, at least behind the kind of corridor, look more like the top of the building, it'd be a much more rational plan. Assuming that the commercial wasn't there. Maybe the commercial becomes all of those functions that are in the middle of this building in the north side of the building, and that you have the kind of corridor coming through, and then you have this wonderful open space in the middle, and the front of the building becomes all of those community spaces. There's a whole other possibility here when all of a sudden you don't have the commercial there. And I really think that it would be a much more rational plan to the building that way, which leads me to look at the front of the building. It's a very small building. If I made only one comment about this, I would think that this would be it. That, you know, you have an idea of screening in the front of the building. It would be so much more interesting if that screening were kind of almost the entire building of the front. To divide it into 3 pieces in a building that's only, 65 feet wide is a change in scale and material and confusion to the front of the building, that what you could do with screening that you move around to function as creating the entry, creating the closure from spaces that don't really need to look out onto this busy street, makes a different kind of building. The screening turns the corners in some places, as you have shown it, and would do so all around the building, but there's an excessive use of screening here, actually inserted into the rest of the building just so that you see a piece of it again and again and again. That's kind of my feeling about the aesthetic of the front of a small building like this, that it should look more like built out of lesser number of units being used very well. And that the functions would then have to be changed. That's a suggestion, of course, you know, just to how you think about this building. And that your main idea here is all around the redwoods and all around the cenote idea, and that coffee shop as a part of the function of this building could be expanded a little bit too. You could have your eating facility somehow there. And it would all be focused into that one area. That seems to me to be the major way in which this building ought to be treated. The other thought I have about it is that there's really 28 people in this building. It's not a huge number of people to occupy a space that's quite this big with that many other use spaces, community rooms, exercise room, dining room. How do you divide up that organization of a small number of people into something that can make this a vibrant building where you actually will have better contact with other people? You will have it in the cenote, and everything should be happening around that. And it should be the major attraction. I think conceptually, you'll get a much stronger building if you start thinking that way. And I hope that the city will let you do it, that there is some procedure within the city that lets you emphasize that and eliminate the retail.
There is, I don't really want to explore that further because we can't encourage them to not meet the code. The code is the code. We need your input on the project that is proposed. I think the comment that, there is this other process and they should consider it, is fine, but, we still need your input on the project that is proposed, which does have a requirement, so.
Okay, should we keep moving around? Board Member Ed.
So yeah, I'll move to the subject of exterior elevations and materials. So we will not talk about retail anymore. So starting with your elevation on PA 5.1, kind of like similar to what David was saying, I think the west, it's the west street side elevation. You have that kind of a three-part thing, but I think what you were saying earlier about the middle, the orange piece is going to be replaced with an art expression, which I think will help make this more of a two-piece instead of, two verticals instead of three, like depending on how that art gets developed. The left and the middle might be and I think it will be better as a continuous backdrop for the art piece instead of having a B, and a C. So food for thought, but it also looks like you have kind of this angled hood around that orange area, which may also get impacted depending on how that art develops. And I think trying to unify at least 2 out of the 3 portions of that elevation might help simplify that look. And I don't know if it's feasible at all, but like that versus what I'm seeing on the upper elevation at the upper courtyard, like currently your rendering shows those as kind of the same thing. And it also makes sense for that to be, relate to each other, even if it's major art and a minor art piece of the same family. And the third part of that is when you go to the back elevation, the east elevation, and I think it was an earlier question about it too, about, access to those windows, putting that same motif in the back kind of dilutes the value of that specialness. Because it's, yes, as a, elevation logic, it makes sense, but it doesn't seem like it has a place there, and it loses the importance of that special thing at the courtyard when you repeat it as a little token in the back. So I would suggest get rid of that, and you don't have to do alternate means for egress out of those windows once you have that as well. So in terms of colors and materials, I think, I also have a slight concern of how bright white the samples are, and probably want to tone that down. On the north side, it might be okay, but on the east and south and west, it might be a little too bright as you drive down the street. So I would recommend just looking one more time at it, maybe a slightly less bright exterior material in that area. Yeah, I think as far as like the form and the massing, I think the respecting those 2 trees to help shape your building is very nice. I do have slight concerns about how, and it's hard to tell from your renders, like how that kind of arc shape changes as you go up the building. I think it might be on your, this view, more of like, how are you going to build it, and how's the edge of slab and all that going to work. So that's your problem, not mine, but it seems to change on every floor, and I urge you to kind of think through that and maybe have some kind of organization to it that might help the design to develop further anyway. And I really hate that gate at the first floor.
to stair 3. It just, on back to elevation PA 5.1, over on the far right, like the whole the 3 parts elevation, and then when you get to the far right, there's a gate to the stair in that little slot. It just doesn't feel like a nice thing to happen right facing San Antonio.
That's all.
That's all, huh? Okay. Member Rosenberg?
I'm a little less fussed about the gate. I'm wondering if maybe they can make it match the artwork to some extent. And I logically understand why that staircase is there, and I think it is appropriate considering the size of that balcony. Again, it does feel like you kind of wish there was a better solution, but this is what we're fighting. So maybe just make that gate as attractive as possible. I was not initially, but now I'm in agreement with my colleagues' commentary on the front facade. I actually did not have an issue with the 3-part paneling to begin with, but looking at the rear facade, I actually do think it's a bit more successful in the regards, if you don't mind jumping over to that sheet. There we go. No, one more. There we go. So if you look at this lower one, it's actually quite attractive, right? It's got plenty of window, plenty of wall. There's enough going on without being overly complicated. Now, I 100% agree with Board Member Adcock's concept that this screening on the rear facade is superfluous and kind of dilutes the specialness of the screens elsewhere. So I'd probably get rid of it here, solve your egress problems. I think that makes a lot of sense. But I think getting a little bit more consistency on the front facade would also be beneficial to the project. To speak on the white color, I'm one of the people that sort of was pushing for the LRV number that we decided on a few sessions back. So personally, I don't have an issue with the LRV, the Zurich white. The LRV is 76. We typically say that Swiss coffee with the LRV of 72 is our sort of brightest you're allowed to go. So I have no complaints about this particular white, but that's my opinion. I think the white metal paneling it's a cold white. It's not attractive. And then also just to touch on Board Member Hirsch's commentary, I think that paneling on that front facade is maybe not the most successful design. So if we could flip back to that front facade elevation as well. It's sort of the wrong material, and I am sort of inclined to start agreeing with my fellow board members that this left portion needs to be reworked a bit. I do like the entryway. I do like the hood. I like the angling. I like the screen. And I think the whole right side of this is quite successful, especially considering what the purpose of this project is. It's just that left side I'm not super keen on at the moment. Really big picture for this project. I really love the cenote idea. I remember when it came in as the pre-hearing, and it was really just a lovely concept. I think you guys have done a really excellent job of trying to get a very complicated project to work very elegantly. I do think that having 28 people living here is going to leave this building feeling quite a bit empty a lot. On that note, I'm not touching on retail, I promise. I do think it makes sense to have more public access because of that, to get a little more life and vibrancy. I do think that the cenote is the star of this architectural piece, and that having everything sort of be around that makes a lot of sense. I might ask you to consider all of the assisted living being on one level. I think that for security reasons, for ease of use, that might be a thoughtful way to sort of tackle that problem. I would also be curious if there's a need for an on-site live-in caretaker, and whether there's a unit specified for that. Something we didn't bring up earlier, but I'm just going to put that out there for you guys to ponder. I don't know if that's in your plans or not for as needed. Overall, and then one other thing I would touch on is that on your north side facade specifically, those balconies could go to the property line, and then you would meet your 6-foot open space balcony setback, and that could be a little bit useful for you guys as well. So I would definitely consider, I would definitely encourage considering that.
Do that.
Why not? They can go to they can go to the property line.
To the setback
Yeah,
line.
just, so, excuse me, to the
Yep.
setback line. I apologize, I misspoke. Just to the setback line. Thank you. Apologies. Did not mean to say property line. To the setback line, because you are a bit of a distance there. You might be able to pick that up on levels 3 and 4. Lastly, I would just say that the bike room on the ground level, I understand why you pushed it there. I understand that we were pushing for that as well in our previous commentary. I just don't think it maybe needs to be quite as big. Maybe it could be a little bit smaller. Maybe the location could be tweaked, but again, that's not something I have any suggestions specifically for. And for now, I will leave it at that. But overall, I think that the project is really moving in a right direction. I think that the concept as a whole is a good concept. I like the usability of the building, I think, is really successful for the most part. And I'm excited to see where you guys take it next. So thanks very much.
Board Member Chen, do you care to chime in?
Thank you so much for your presentation. I think you did very good job on the overall planning, and thank you for creating all kinds of outdoor space and activities for the senior living to provide them a very good quality of living lifestyle. I do have some concern about the trash collection. It's from both from each unit to the trash room and from the trash room to the the staging area along the street. So I think there is still something we can figure it out and provide a better solution. And also where the retail trash located, how to get access to it, it is also can be reconsidered. As far as the, excuse me, as far as the elevations, I agree. For the front elevation, it seems like there are too much elements on the narrow facade like this. You divide it into 3 pieces, and even on the right side, you still divide it into upper level and lower level. I think it's nice for you to have the metal screen, but I agree that for the community center side, maybe we can have some similar elements as you use for the other places. I think that's all my comments for now. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody. So, yeah, just following up on the front facade, I agree with what everyone else has said. I think Kendra pointed it out best that the back facade actually is more successful with the simpler pairing on the right and the left with the more decorative art feature in the middle. So the front facade with the vertical screens on the left for the community rooms and such above it's just too much. And the building will be more successful if you simplify it. I'm confident you can do that. You said you were thinking of changing the functionality, perhaps to the kitchen. All that might fall into place nicely. I'm concerned that the white color is too bright, especially contrasting to this wood-colored paneling here. It just doesn't feel in sync enough to me. And I think the answer is to tone it down. I know originally you had it much darker and we said it was too dark. Now you made it lighter and now we're saying it's too light. So in the end, I think you'll find we have a lot of respect for what you ultimately come up with. But my opinion is that the white color, either the Zurich white or Swiss coffee, they're both too bright for this situation here. So I'd like to see you reconsider that. On the building planning, I'm concerned about the way the parking drop-off area at the front impedes on the front entrance. There really is only a couple of feet of actual walking space that's not dimpled for ADA accessibility between the corner. It clearly just blocks off the front door in a very unelegant way. And if you think of this again, this really is the front door for 28 people. And you would never park a car here on a private home or in a large apartment building. And I understand the need for this drop-off space, but the planning in this case is just not working. You just can't have a drop-off parking space 10 feet away from a front door, narrowing it down to a 3-foot pathway to get to a double door. It's not working. So I'd encourage you just to rethink how you accommodate that important pickup feature and not sticking it quite so directly in front of the building. On the roof deck upstairs, I wonder if you couldn't rethink it a little bit and just make a private staircase for the owner to access from the owner's apartment, rather than having the elevator go up and deal with all these issues you're going to be faced with, claiming it to be for the residents. If it really is a private roof deck for the owner of the facility, call a spade, simplify your design and your use and get it there. If you really do intend for it to be used by the community, then I think you've got some issues to deal with, both how it's designed, and then it's going to be larger than the 50 square feet of occupant load. So you're going to have other issues to deal with. So again, it's the same basic idea we've been facing on a lot of other things. You're at some level, you're just designing to meet all these numerous code constraints, and you've got to sort of put it together as architecture at some point. The drop off in front of the door, the roof balcony, that's not quite proper for a huge number of people, but intended just for one family upstairs, the question of the retail. I see that same theme throughout the building, and I fully get it. You've got a really challenging issue here, but you've got to, at some point, go beyond meeting code requirements, meeting technical and such requirements, and put it all together. You'll find in the facade that when you simplify that, it'll click into place as well. I think as a board, we should be clear about allowing these balconies to project a little bit. If I remember, we had a straw poll vote saying that they really needed to keep balconies within the setback. I think otherwise, but even then, the balconies could project to the setback on the north side to great advantage of the interior, because you're not going to reduce further the size of the living room. I do feel that the 6-foot dimension we've given in our objective standards is the right dimension for those balconies. Less than that, they just don't function properly. In this case, you could project them out. You might find it actually helps you with the texturing of the facade. So it might be a win in several ways, but you should do that. I'd like to be sure that as a board, we chime in on that is okay for them to do that.
Yeah, totally agreed. In fact, and because this is a senior living facility, having, enough space for even a wheelchair to turn around on the balcony seems like a basic.
I'm pretty sure that was one of our thoughts
Right.
as we were doing that, making that regulation. So I think we're all in agreement with that, but the balconies need to be the 6-foot depth.
Yeah.
And I think nobody's saying you shouldn't project as far as the setback line. Is that right? David, are you agreeing with that? Board Member Chen, do you have an issue with the balconies?
No, yeah, agree. It should be like 6 feet, but I just want to clarify, there's no setback required for this lot, right? It's just the 5 feet that we asked last time, because it's 0 setback for this side. Is it correct?
Claire, there's a setback clearly marked on the plans. Is that not a code requirement?
The side yard setback in the CS zoning district,
It's 5 for residential uses, I think, right?
Yeah, on the chart, it says none but 6 feet left and right provided, and existing is 5.
I believe it's 5 feet for residential for a side yard.
well,
Good.
no, yeah, that doesn't.
Oh,
it's only if it's a button.
only if it's a budding.
Oh, wait, no, and then that's street.
That's street.
I just want to tell them where they can put their balcony.
So I believe that there isn't a zoning requirement for a setback, but because of fire access, they're required to have the 5-foot aisles basically around the building.
A balcony, either way, a balcony can project up to 2 feet into a setback anyway, so it could be wider. But either way.
I'd like to make a clear statement. As a board, we feel that the balconies need to be 6 feet deep, and we're okay with them projecting beyond the plane of the building. And should we say 5 feet from the property line? Is that what we feel is appropriate?
Yeah, and that would give them, space to do both.
Right.
Yeah.
I just want to give,
Yeah.
as designers, they just need to know,
Agreed.
because I think they believe that they had to keep it back. And so we're saying it should really stay at 5 feet setback for the balconies. Okay. I would like to comment about the bicycle access. I think you'll find that many seniors are using a 3-wheeled style bicycle, which is quite cumbersome. And so You'd like to be sure you have access directly from the street along the side of the building and directly into that bike shed rather than going through the glazed facade wall from the courtyard area with the planting. Having a door directly into the side of that would be beneficial, I think. And you do want to consider, I believe, the size of that room. I very much doubt seniors, probably anyone, are going to go down the ramp into the back of the parking garage to park their bicycle. So the reality is, again, that upper lot is, the upper bike storage room is probably going to be used by half a dozen people on a regular basis. And so you want to be sure it works for that. And they're fairly large bicycles a lot of older people use. So just throwing that out as a comment. Okay, those are my comments. Does anybody else have anything else to add? Go ahead.
Yeah, I still feel that somehow there could be some better planning and that somehow or other you rework all of the stuff that you have in the middle, the care facility, the trash area that they described, all of the restrooms on the ground floor, mail room and all of that, in some way where you could get a private access that would provide a corridor all the way through front to back, moving some of those facilities into the blue area and finding a way to expand on the blue area, perhaps at the back side of the, so that curved into the what is called the living room area there. It seems to me that you have less need for something like that facility on that floor, then you could use that. One of your community rooms upstairs could be a space like that. But what this would gain you if you shuffled it around a bit and moved, and if you could move all the residential facilities so that the typical plan was all the way down to the first floor, makes a huge difference in this project. That then possibly the front areas, even if some of them like the dining room were double height space within that, and that you screen the entire front of the building with this wonderful wood texture that you have, that makes it a kind of a homier, friendlier building entirely. At the bottom of it, clearly it has to move differently, but it turns the corner as you have shown it. So it sort of wraps the whole front of the building. It just aesthetically, I think it would be a much stronger building than the way it looks right now, especially if it were possible to move those units into a kind of a pattern that they fit into what you have for all of the upper floors. That's my concern that I've lost my sound here. Yeah, maybe it's my own thing here.
We can hear you fine.
Well, I pretty much said it. I think that simplifying the front of the building, there we go. Simplifying the front of the building is going to be a major improvement in the whole outlook. Then, so you have a section of that happening again in the courtyard. I can certainly go along with that. You know, it's a repeat, and it's a nice memory image all of a sudden when you have it all over the front and then you repeat it, it becomes more meaningful in the area of the Cenote. So it's just that I'm saying that replanning to some extent seems to me to be possible still, since you're going to be one way or another required to keep the commercial. Part of what you could do with the commercial is have its own lobby and own circulation. So as you move through that, you see the bar in the distance there. You know, you move in that direction and there is the space. You're going to have the shared space in some way. I think you rework your space, move the blue around and move the move your residential into a more organized. Okay, final, as a suggestion to be considered.
So let's, Claire, let's see if we can wrap up the comments we made so we can at
Yeah.
least be
Can
somewhat
I
useful.
ask one more question?
Of course.
And this might be a question for planning. I forgot about this earlier, sorry. So the max building height is 50 feet. And the tabulation says it's 47.9 proposed, which is to the roof surface. And I guess parapets and stair pop-ups can exceed that. Is that correct?
No, the parapet is counted towards the maximum height, and so we consider that they are taking up the entire 50 feet allowable height because it's measured to the parapet.
So the proposed on the tabulation is really 50, correct? Not 47. And what about the trellis that they're proposing that bumps it up to 57.9? Are trellises allowed above the 50 feet?
Yes, so the stair access to the roof deck and then any structures associated with the roof deck have a height exception.
Okay, so any it's freestanding, not attached to the stair, but like a cover, canopy, whatever else they put for the roof deck is all allowed to exceed.
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
I believe that the staff, we had a meeting earlier this week. They asked for more time to really evaluate code ramifications of that. This is being pushed to us a little bit earlier than it might be because we're trying to give them good feedback as they work through planning issues. So we should let staff dive into that. There's been some talk back and forth in the city.
I want to add just one note. Can I, please?
Sure, of course.
Rooftop garden. I mean, what you're saying, what I think you're saying is that it would really be nice if there were more of the rooftop for everybody. And it might mean that somehow or other you have to work with the stair access to the roof.
Well, no, I was asking, is that for everybody or just for the owner? And if it is for everybody, then, the 44 people area seems a little, pushing the numbers and you might need both exits. If it's just for the private, which I understood the applicant's response was, then, and Peter added to that, then maybe a private stair to the rooftop might be more appropriate than the public stair and elevator having, key card limitations to where you can go would make more sense. And also still limit to square footage that keeps it under 49 people.
What you would, if you're going to get all of the community using the upper floor, then you'll need a second means of egress, right? A public.
Correct, but I
public
think
means
their
of egress.
intent is to not have everybody use the roof garden, just the owner.
I have to say that I think that's unfortunate that she's sharing so many other things. Maybe she would reconsider the rooftop because it's such a great place to be, looking out at the bay, looking at the mountains, et cetera.
Okay, it's noted
Yeah.
that Board Member Hirsch thinks it'd be great to have a roof deck for everybody.
Yeah.
I would like us to sum up what our comments are so we can
right.
sort of clear. Claire, do you want to take a stab at that or shall I help you?
I will take a stab at it. So I think with respect to the retail, we hear your thoughts. We can't change the code, but we will certainly explore, really try and think about what our options are under the code. Aside from that, we hear your comments regarding just the design of the space as it affects security and how it's designed around that private space. There were some options that were discussed about potentially refining the design in terms of access to the units at the back or moving those to the second floor potentially and doing more amenity space on the ground floor. So those are certainly options that can be considered. Other design features, we heard simplification of the design of the frontage in terms of especially it's kind of broken up into three pieces right now and potentially refining it to two pieces would refine the design and simplify the design. We heard the comment about the white, the Zurich white in particular, and making it kind of a softer color. And kind of rethinking the paneling as well, I heard, and on the left side. Rethinking the drop-off space and the making sure that the access to the main entrance is really accessible and clear for the number of residents that are going to be using that. Really considering the trash pickup and whether there are other options for that as well. And then the stairwell on the right side of the building and whether there are refinements to that design that could be made and how that kind of fronts out to San Antonio. Yeah, if you have two more.
Yeah, the other two things that I picked up was that they should consider taking away the rear screen as well as, oh man, now it went away.
Extending the balconies.
Oh, yes, that was it. Widening the balconies to 6 feet and making sure they're ADA accessible.
And then finally, the bike rooms and really having an exterior access to the bike rooms and really, making sure it's designed appropriately, understanding that a lot of residents would probably use that ground floor space for the bike parking. I think those are the key comments I heard. If you guys have anything to add.
If I could clarify, in comment number 9, you said widening the balconies to 6 feet. That's true, but I don't know that we said make them ADA accessible. That might be a functional requirement that's too complicated.
Well, one board member had said something about accommodating wheelchairs potentially, so
Yeah.
I took that more
Well,
literally.
6 feet would accommodate that, but we don't want to specifically say ADA accessible,
Okay.
which would pull in like push-pull clearance, all of that. So,
Yeah, it's not
Just
required.
being able to turn around with a
Right.
wheelchair. Yes,
Yeah.
we, okay.
So don't put that,
Understood.
don't put those ADA words in your request to them.
Okay.
Is there anybody else has anything else that we think they should be taking away from this? So we're looking for a motion to continue this to a date uncertain, subject to these comments we just outlined here. Would somebody like to make that motion?
yes, I'll make the motion to continue till date uncertain.
Would somebody else like to second that motion?
I'll second that.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded. Board Member Rosenberg, we cut you off on your attempt to go over the retail. I'll give you a minute if you want to sum up before we go forward with the vote. And this will be the last word on this issue, gang.
I appreciate you guys taking the time on this. I think that it's one of those that we need to be careful. We can't fight what's on the books. We want to comply. They are making a solid, valiant effort to comply. And I think we need to understand the requirements and the restrictions that are being placed on them and understand their efforts to meet those. On a personal note, my grandmother was in assisted living for quite a long time. And what I can tell you is that there is a huge benefit to having vibrancy around them. When they are isolated in their own space, there's no public coming in or out. It can be cold, dark, dreary, and way too quiet. There's a huge benefit. They've done numerous studies, especially in Scandinavia, about having assisted living facilities that are more vibrant and more public. So I would encourage my fellow board members to, yes, there's privacy concerns. Yes, there's things like that. But I do think that those, I'm going to wrap up, I promise. I do think those concerns, there's a balance here, and that I think that they're trying to find a good balance. And I think that we should encourage and support these efforts because I think they are going in the right direction. That's where I'll end my comments.
Thank you, Board Member Rosenberg. Can we have a vote on the motion, please?
Board Member Adcock,
Yes, thank you.
Board Member Chen,
Yes.
Board Member Hirsch,
Yes,
Vice Chair Rosenberg,
Yes.
Chair Balte.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Great. We're going to take a 10-minute break before we go to our next item. So we'll reconvene at 5 after 11.
I'm gonna say no until I know better.
Okay, we're back in session. Next item on our agenda is study session, summary of focus group review and feedback on existing SB9 standards continued from November 16th. So we're going to move on to that. If I remember right, we're now focusing on the Eichler standards. And do we have a staff presentation or summary or bring us up to speed on that, please?
Yes, I can bring up the slides. So in summary, the ARB reviewed the revised standards with numbers, or it was renumbered or relettered to A through D on previous meetings on November 23rd and December 7th. And so today the focus is on the Eichler neighborhood specific standards. This is a repeat slide from previous presentations, just explaining that in that first November 23rd report, there was an attachment A and an attachment B, and the way that we've presented it are from attachment B. And these are the standards for discussion today. I can give introductions, or do we want to jump into discussion another way?
I don't know that you need to go through it any more than this. I'd like to go through them one at a time like we've done before and just pause on the ones that we want to discuss. So could you clarify though, these are standards that would apply to houses, buildings that are in mapped Eichler tracts? And these sort of overlie other standards, or do they replace other standards?
It's likely going to be a combination. As we go through, I can discuss where it is replacing and where it is in addition to. Scanning it right now, I think it's mainly in instead of, and so I can directly tie which ones it is instead of.
Okay, let's be sure as we discuss them, then we understand whether it's replacing or overlying on top of it. Mapped Eichler tracts, there's a clear definition of that in our zoning map, I guess?
It's not in the zoning map, but as a part of the preparation of the Eichler design guidelines, which is a document that we have, there is a map associated with that document that identified mapped Eichler tracts, and we use that frequently, again, mainly for single family building permits and individual review projects.
So this question came up earlier again, was that this would then apply to all structures in the mapped Eichler tract, regardless of whether the structure itself is of an Eichler design style.
Correct. It would apply to development of a SB9 project in those sites. Functionally, if there was a situation where, you know, they were doing an urban lot split and building like a second unit, but maintaining the existing structure, of course, that existing structure would be allowed to remain as is, whether or not it was an Eichler.
And to further clarify, this does not apply to Eichler style or Eichler built homes outside of the Eichler tracts. If there's a rogue Eichler somewhere, it does not apply to that house just because that's in an Eichler style. Is that correct? They must be in these Eichler tract mapped areas.
Correct.
Okay.
And there are certain neighborhoods with, sometimes we refer to them as Leiklers, houses built by other builders. Yeah.
They're also fakelers.
Fakelers?
Yeah.
Okay, so before we go through it again, I'd like to welcome Arnold Marmarella is with us today. Arnold, you can turn your microphone on so we can hear you. And
Good morning.
Thank you, Arnold. I'd like you to just chime in as part of the group here, because Arnold has the most experience on these of any of us, and this is a challenging issue. So let's go through let's just start going through these things.
Actually, can I ask for another clarification
of
on
course.
the Eichler tract? So, Emily, did you say that they're mapped or, and so there's mapped areas where these lots are from the original Eichler construction, and this would apply to if whether the original Eichler house is there anymore or not, it's part of that lot. Is that correct?
So this document that I just pulled up is the map that was prepared by Page and Turnbull as a part of the Eichler Design Guideline development. And so we cross-reference this with, our parcel reports or Google Maps or whatever to check if addresses are within one of these Eichler tracts.
I think Adcock's question, it would apply even if an Eichler had been pulled down in that area and rebuilt as a non-Eichler, these would still apply if they're within the tract, right? I think so.
Yes, it would apply.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, did I miss something? Did the Eichlers that are not in tracts are not considered a part of any of this?
It wouldn't apply to Eichlers outside of that, but board member Adcock's question was whether it would apply to houses that are non-Eichlers within an Eichler tract, and yes, it would.
So let us pull up the guidelines.
I think the concern is that there are a few buildings within these Eichler tracts that are not Eichler style or that have been renovated in such a way as to no longer be truly Eichler style, be Fakelers. And we just want to understand that these regulations would apply to all structures in that area.
As currently written, these guidelines would apply to all buildings within those mapped areas as currently written.
So I guess the first thing we can ask then is there some way to further define this? It has to also be a building of an Eichler style.
Well, I think you'll see that a lot of these guidelines are talking about massing.
Yeah.
And so even if it's a modern style building or, colonial style, whatever it may be, even if that type of house is in an Eichler tract, we would want the massing to be similar.
And if I understand correctly, this is, we're trying to, this is all new development in SB 9 specific projects. So there's always other ways for somebody who has a modern farmhouse to get their modern farmhouse ADU. This is specifically for new developments with SB 9s. Okay.
Okay, so the first one is got to do with garage placement and size. Does anybody have any questions or concerns about this?
I do have a question for the last part, and it says, has a maximum height of not more than 12 feet above existing grade. That is to the peak or to the eave?
It would be to the top of a flat roof.
Or a ridge.
Or a sloped roof, yeah.
Yeah.
or a ridge. Okay, thank you.
Is there a reason we're allowing a slope whatsoever? Eichlers typically have minimal roof slopes.
Yes.
I live in
The,
an Eichler with a 3 to 12, so yes.
Yes, Arnold?
Yeah, and a lot of this was sort of extracted out of the Eichler the guidelines also. And so in the Eichler guidelines, they mention roof slopes up to 3 and 12 are typical in that type of architecture. I know many Eichlers have roof slopes that are maybe like 2 and 12 and 1.5 and 12, but so some of these numbers are kind of based on extracting some information out of the Eichler design guidelines as well as the IR guidelines.
Okay, great. So any questions, comments, concerns on standard number 1?
Yes, and actually, I live in an Eichler neighborhood. My house is, I think, 3 to 12 on the backside where it's steeper, but my next door neighbor has a much steeper original Eichler. I think it's like, looks more like a 4 to 12 or 5 to 12. It's very steep peak, and quite a few of the houses in our neighborhood is of that steeper, more triangulated roof type. So is that not I have not studied every Eichler neighborhood in Palo Alto for sure. Is that not the case in Palo Alto?
Well, I think this is referring to roofs over garages. Is that right, Arnold?
Yes, this is, but elsewhere in the guidelines, it does talk about maximizing the roof pitch at 3 and 12. There's a handful of Eichlers that were built in the Eichler architecture style in Palo Alto and elsewhere where they have flat roofs, but they have maybe a small portion of the roof is a steeper pitch
Mhm.
over the central atrium. So maybe what is being referred to here. But those are a fairly small number of iClas, just like there's a very small number of iClas that have hip roofs too.
Yeah, very few have hip roofs, but yeah, so this particular item is only talking about the garage, but we'll get to the next item that talks about roof slope at other areas.
Okay, so are
Thank
we
you.
all okay with E1 regarding the garages and roofs over garages? 21 feet seems like the right width. Okay, the second item is the second floor area being limited to 35% of the gross floor area on the lot means the gross allowable FAR.
Yes.
And is this again coming out of the Eichler guidelines? Where did this number come from?
So this is the one that I wanted to call attention to, Claire, on slide 9. C4, which we discussed previously and would be moving to the B section to apply to all single, all two-story houses, regardless of size, limits it to 35%. Initially, the Eichler one was lower, it was 30%, but then as a result of the focus group process, had been changed to 35% so that there wasn't a difference between the Eichler and the non-Eichler.
So standard E2 is essentially the same as C10. C4, I'm sorry, C4. So there's no really any point to having it then. Unless, Arnold, is there a reason we should further restrict the size of second stories on Eichlers?
Well, I think that when we originally were considering how to sort of apply individual review guidelines as objective standards, we thought there was a need to restrict the second floor size so that we wouldn't get boxy buildings. And I think there's just been an element of refinement here, kind of coalescing around 35%, where originally we thought a little less because the examples in the guidelines for the Eichler examples are closer to 30%.
I see,
So
okay.
we were using the examples in the guidelines originally, but I think it's now we've got additional information and it now seems like 35% might be a better number. So this is sort of kind of where it's trended.
Do you support this yourself, or you think 35% is a fair number?
I think that it really depends on the lot size, and that makes it a little bit more complicated. When you get a little bit smaller lot sizes, especially if they do subdivide, it's hard to get a workable upper floor at 350 square feet or 400 square feet. So I think it's an okay number. I think it's with a much larger lot size, then I think it gets a little bit trickier. But I think this could be acceptable.
And I'd like to ask, wouldn't it be useful to have a diagram of some of these kinds of changes, especially with a sort of limitation of the 35%? In a typical house, you might imagine that you would want to have more because you might, if it's less of a ground floor area, the upper floor would be more useful as a 2-bedroom than it would be if you had no ability to put a 2-bedroom into a house that is a smaller house, but not an Eichler, for example.
Yes, and so based on your prior discussion about C4, which is a very similar requirement, but for all 2-story houses, we are studying a minimum square footage, I believe maybe around 400 square feet, but the idea is that we will analyze and make sure at least 2 bedrooms would fit upstairs.
Perfect. Yeah, that's what I'm asking about.
Go ahead.
So does that work at 35%? On an Eichler, it's a big floor plate, and so 35%. Well, it's not based on the floor plate, then, is it really? I mean, the ground floor, it's not 35% of what?
Would be 35% of the allowed floor area for that lot.
Uh-huh. So you're already using up whatever you are on the ground floor. And it's,
Right. So it's like 65% of the house would be on the ground floor and 35% would be on the second floor.
The individual review guidelines generally encourage architects to put as much floor area as possible on the ground floor before putting programming up on the second floor. And so this is the spirit of that made objective.
So since the SB9 allows like 2 units and two main residents and 2 ADUs, and then the 35% of the total gross floor area is still exclude the ADU on the first floor, is it correct?
My understanding, Emily, you could clarify, is the 35% is on the allowed floor area, not in consideration of ADUs. ADU is a totally separate number.
Yes, that's correct. The ADU would be separate.
Even the ADU is attached to the building. When you can calculate the floor area, it's still separate.
So the 35% is of the allowable floor area, which would be regardless of how that floor area was divided between 2 units. Under SB9, ADUs do not necessarily get any ADU bonus floor area.
Thanks.
It will be beneficial to clarify that here, that we're talking about the FAR that comes out of the ratio of the lot size and 35% of that amount, not 35% of that amount plus 800 square feet.
Yeah, so the way it's written, I'm not sure which slide we're currently on, if we went back to E2 or not, but the language says shall not exceed 35% of the total gross floor area on the lot.
And that's what I'm suggesting. We just tighten it up in response to Board Member Chen's comment.
Yeah, but I think as we're talking more about it, we're realizing that the ADU for an SB9 project, the ADU has to use the gross floor area for the site. And this guideline is regulating that gross floor area. That's specific to SB9. So that's why it takes us a minute to talk about it.
Okay.
So sorry. So in an SB9 project, you have to.
Microphone.
Sorry, I'm going to steal Peter's for a minute here. So in an SB9 project, the FAR is basically the calculation of the building that's allowed to be plus an additional 800 for an ADU per state law.
There is no extra 800.
Okay, so this FAR really is the just the normal floor area calculation.
For SB9, there is no extra 800 square feet.
Got
Yes, there's only the regular FAR.
And that typically protected 800 square feet that is utilized for ADUs would just is part of that area, and it has to be counted at every moment.
There's
Don't mean to have a pop quiz here. I just want to make sure that I
Yeah, let
understand,
it-
because typically the ADUs have that 800-foot exemption, and we never add that on. We always just say this is sort of not counted.
Yeah,
So
so in the SB9 section of the code, which is 1842, 180, it specifies that on parcels that are not the result of an urban lot split, accessory dwelling units may be proposed. However, the ADUs shall not receive any exemption from floor area. And that also means on a lot that is doing an urban lot split, that ADU is just the second allowable unit. It's not an accessory dwelling unit per our usual thinking of it, even though size-wise and function-wise, it's going to be pretty similar.
Okay, so we're going to just use the number 800 square feet. Will the 800 square feet be counted differently if they split the lot versus if they don't actually split it, but it's still an SB9 project?
Based on this, no.
Okay. Clear as mud. Thank you very much.
Sorry, one more question. So ADU is not allowed. How about the JADU? Is it the same?
I think in this, when we're talking about SB9, it may look and smell like an ADU, but it's really a second unit. That's how we think about it for SB9. It's a second unit, and it might be a small second unit, but it's a second unit.
Are these being referred to as duos, dual urban opportunity, or are those, is that
That's a
totally
new word
whole
for
nother
us.
one? Okay, thank you.
But possibly, but I haven't heard that one.
So our job is to decide if 35% is the right number. So for what it's worth, if you take a 6,000 square foot lot and split it in half, that's 3,000 square feet times 0.45 leaves you with 1,350 square feet of allowable floor area. 35% of that going upstairs makes you have 472 square feet, which ought to accommodate 2 bedrooms. I think 30% is probably also going to work. So do we feel that Eichlers are special and would merit an additional reduction, or just leave it the same as all other houses?
I think we can leave it, we should leave it at the same as the all other houses,
One
just
vote.
because with the lot split, it will get smaller. But I do have a question on this, just kind of like the map you were showing earlier with the Eichler tracts. Is there a map that shows not a single story overlay zone within an Eichler tract? I'm just curious how much of this actually applies.
There are, in the Eichler guidelines, there's a map that shows which districts have a single story overlay, and I believe that's just 2 of the 30 odd districts of single story overlay.
So a small percentage, but there are ones that have this.
So single story overlay will supersede these regulations as well then? Or does SB9
You
trump
can't have a
supersede?
second floor on those.
So you could stipulate that even if an SB9 project came in following state guidelines, our second story overlay would override that?
So it doesn't
Single-story overlay.
prevent them from doing an SB9 project. It just prevents them from having the second story.
And that is objective, so we can just say that.
Yeah.
Okay, look,
That's exactly what I was
And
trying
then
to
to
clarify is
no, we're
that you
gonna get,
don't,
let's get back to the question, 30% or 35%?
35.
35.
35, okay, Board Member Chen? Yes, 35?
Yeah.
Board Member Hirsch? Okay, so after all this, we're gonna leave number 2 as it is. Let's go on to number 3.
Might I make a suggestion there, though, is that if this matches C4, why have it at all? Should we strike E2 altogether?
We should, let's leave that to staff to decide how to
Perfect,
how to
thank you.
wordsmith it.
I would motion to keep it just because of that single story overlay clarification that's necessary for Eichler.
So there's also single story overlays that are not Eichler neighborhoods. But that would be considered potentially something to mention
On
when it gets
C4 instead,
combined.
yeah.
So staff, if you could just take note of these question marks that come out of fine tuning and address them as is appropriate. The next one is regarding daylight planes. This one is significant. We want to start the daylight plane for Eichlers at 6 feet instead of, is it 8 or 10, isn't it?
It's 8, and we had a long conversation about that last time, about the 8 versus 10.
Yeah.
I
Where did
even have
we
my
go last-
diagrams from my
Yes,
last
so,
time, right?
okay, so Board Member Adcock, bring us up to speed then. So this is proposing a 6-foot starting point for the side yard daylight planes. Regular houses have 10-foot, and we were questioning whether it should be 8, is that right? Or was they
So it-
proposing to make it 8 and we pushed back to 10?
So it's 10 in the base zoning, and we made it 8 for SB9 properties as a part of when adjacent to 1-story houses specifically. So if it's adjacent to 2-story, this doesn't apply for the regular houses. This is, oh,
And in Eichler tract, you're much more likely to be next to a single story anyway, right? I have concerns about the 6 feet because by the time you say 6 feet and then your property line, your edge of where you can build is 4 feet away, right? So with that ratio of a daylight plane, at 4 feet away, you're hitting 10 feet. So it's kind of barely making plate height, especially when you think about any grade changes. So I'm inclined to suggest that it stays 8 feet, just like any
Well,
other
this is, be
house.
careful, this is not plate height. This is the top of the roof at the edge of the exterior wall.
Exactly.
So the eave can
So-
project, but it's including the structure of the roof, which is
Right.
often a 12
Yeah,
inch structure. on an
Exactly. So
So you have a
at 4
9-foot
feet,
maximum plate.
yes. So I think it's extremely restrictive.
Arnold, is this something that comes out of the guidelines, or where did this idea come from?
You know, to be honest, I'm not exactly sure where the 6 foot number came from. I mean, clearly in the guidelines where we have very, very low houses, you know, which the Eichlers typically are, we're looking for, the second floor to be pushed well away from that house and a lower profile near that house. But I'm not sure where exactly the 6 foot number came from here.
This
So
is
I think
impacting the
Arnold,
first floor, too.
we were trying to codify, we lovingly call it Jody's space under the daylight plane in the office. I don't know that I should have let that out in the open, but when you read the individual review guidelines, basically they talk about, when you're next to a single story structure, there should be space under the daylight plane. The guidelines don't have a measurement to that. And so, I was just, can I fit under the daylight plane or not? That's the rule. And so we were saying that, we wanted additional space when you're next to an Eichler, because these are normally, small, the massing of these homes are normally smaller. And so this is trying to make that more objective.
In terms of building on the top of a Eichler, you have to follow the slope, don't you? They're all sloped in that direction, so that to build something on top of it, you have to create a flat floor area. Where do you begin that floor area from? And where does it go up there?
Right. Especially when you look at I forget which number, that has the 312 roof, so you're already sloping shallower and Eichler homes typically
Yeah.
have an overhang
Mhm.
as well. So when you're starting at, 6 feet, you can at most be 10 feet to the top of the roof, 4 feet away. I think it's impacting your first floor and not just your second floor when you're losing that 2 extra feet. I think SB9 has already taken 2 feet from the regular, from going from 10 to 8. I don't think going another down to 6 seems necessary for Eichler.
That would be terrible
All
for
right,
the
so,
Eichler.
so just to run the math, make sure we're all on the same page. So if the daylight plane starts at 6 feet at the property line,
Mhm.
it's a 45-degree angle for that daylight plane.
Right.
When you come in 4 feet, which is basically the minimum setback for anything, because that's an ADU setback, you've got an 8-foot max height.
10.
You've got 8 feet, 45? Oh, no, it is 10.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
I knew my math was off.
Mhm.
So 10 foot, but that has implications for if the flooring is at grade versus above grade. Let's say it's 1 foot above grade, right? Most people want to build a little above grade, then you've got 9 feet left. Then you need to have some roof structure, take about a foot out of that. So then, yes, you're down to an 8-foot plate height requirement at that line at a 4-foot setback. However, once you get to 6 feet or anything above that, you do have quite a bit more flexibility. So the argument here is that Eichlers are typically more low slung than a traditional house. So is this 2-foot drop and this almost 8-foot restriction of plate height, more or less? I mean, we're sort of talking rough here, but is that appropriate for an Eichler section, or is it overly restrictive?
Yeah, I personally think it's overly restrictive. My house is 8 feet to the underside of, the exposed deck when it's flat roof area. So plate height is just around there, the beams come down from it. And there are areas like when the beams are deeper, everything goes up just so you don't have like a 6'8" clearance, right? So just based on that, and especially because you can build 4 feet to the edge from the property line, and I'm just thinking of like, my house versus the neighbors who also have the same kind of height on the edge. It's still 8 feet plus. So coming down 6 to that edge just seems like extremely restrictive for given it might be likely a lot split, a smaller house.
Would you suggest that it's the same as the typical lot and house? Or would
Yes.
you recommend like a 7 foot as opposed to that?
I would just keep it the same as
Keep
the
it as 8
regular,
feet?
yeah.
Same,
That's my recommendation,
the
same at
same
8
being
feet.
8,
Mhm.
not 10.
Right.
What would it be like if you just left it standard to the 10 feet? What would the house, what would be wrong with having it as 10 feet?
Well, we had this conversation last time. We already agreed like to 8 feet, or that was in the documents for regular houses. I think if we're like rehashing that if we're gonna talk
Okay,
about 10
so
feet.
then you're supposing then, or you're preferring then that we would stay with 8 feet.
Yes.
Okay.
Is that correct? We decided on 8 feet for typical residential.
Yes, that's correct. Additionally, it was 8 feet specifically for houses that were adjacent to one-story houses. I see that here for the Eichlers, that language about only applying when adjacent to single-story didn't carry over, but it was kind of with a mindset that the Eichlers, because they're lower and predominantly one-story, we had one-story structures in mind. So that would be something that would also be considered, is what an appropriate daylight plane would be if it's in a one-story versus two-story context.
Okay, I agree with Board Member Adcock. 8 feet is a more appropriate starting point for the daylight plane. Any other opinions on that? Are we coalescing around requesting 8 feet, not 6? Board Member Chen?
Yeah, I think 8 feet makes more, works better.
I'm fine with that. And then again, on that same note, if this matches what's previously been written, should we strike it?
Board Member Hirsch, are you still holding out for 10 or is it okay?
Well, I think it's a good idea to kind of work by these ideas with drawings, but you did a little bit of that, so I think that it's better, much better at 8 feet.
Okay, so the board feels that 8 is the more appropriate number, 8 feet. E4 is roof heights. 22-foot maximum height for a pitched roof or 20 for a flat roof. Any comments on that? Where does that number, is that again coming from Eichler Design Guideline Standards or?
It's a modification to one of the second-story standards that, okay, so for A11, yeah, A11, it talks about roof height being based on the roof pitch, with the lowest being 22 feet for roofs with pitches less than 312. And so this is consistent with that, with an additional, if it's truly flat, then the height limit is 20, which is in addition to what is listed in standard A11.
Emily, can I also add that in the individual review guidelines, the Eichler example under guideline 2 has the roof at 20 feet, and it's a slightly pitched roof.
I'm fine with this. Yeah.
My only comment would be, again, we're sort of having this whole thing separating out Eichlers when it matches A12, or excuse me, A11, with the exception that A11 just doesn't list the 20-foot flat. So why not add the 20-foot flat to A11 and call it a day? Right, it's written exactly the same as A11. It just, A11 doesn't include the 20-foot height limit for flat roofs.
So the difference is that, well, yeah, if you combine it with A4 or E4 and E6 together, because one's the height and one's the pitches, then you're right. Yeah, it becomes consistent with A11.
The only thing it would do by combining it is actually further restrict A11, because the way A11 is currently written is that they could have a flat roof up to 22 feet, and this would further restrict those down to 20 feet.
Correct.
So this being separate, sorry, I'm talking it out loud, making sure I understand it. This being separate allows those other projects to go up to 22 feet of flat roof, but an Eichler would have to stay at a 20-foot flat roof. That's the biggest difference here. Okay. How does someone feel about that?
Yeah, Kendra, I think we should let them put it together as they see fit, as long as you meet the intent of what we're talking about.
No, but I think this is an important point, is do we want to further restrict flat roofs of Eichlers versus allowing an Eichler to go up to 22 feet for a flat roof? That's the difference between A11 and E4. So that there's a further restriction on Eichlers if they have a flat roof, whereas if it's not an Eichler, they can go up to 22 feet flat.
I see. Well, should we? Fair enough. Okay, so the moment you pitch your roof a little bit, and so they put a 1/4 inch per foot pitch on it, and then it goes to 22 feet. So it's sort of a loophole in the code here, because every roof is sloped a little bit.
Yeah, flat roof is not actually flat.
Right.
So should we just say 22 feet and leave it at that?
Yeah. And combined with E11, like there's no difference once you do that.
Staff, are you?
It would be a difference still, because A11 allows a 312 roof at 25 feet. So
Good point. That says 25 feet for roof pitches with 3 and 12 and 22 for pitches less than 3 and 12. So there's a slight difference in wording there. So as soon as you hit that 3 and 12, then you can go 25.
right.
Okay,
So
you-
do we
you
keep
need a-
this separate?
You need a more than or something
Yeah.
to separate the two.
Right.
But the intent is that we think Eichler should not be more than 22 feet.
Mhm.
And we're not too concerned about the pitch of the roof further reducing that to 20.
Agree.
Are we all in agreement on that?
Yeah.
I think you take
Strike
into
out the 20
consideration
feet
the
part.
maximum pitch and what you're looking for there, and then that becomes the height. You know, that establishes the height possibility.
Yeah, we've said that you can go up to 3 and 12 pitch, and the maximum height, say 22 feet, measured to the ridge.
Mhm.
So as the architect, you're going to play around with, keep it flat, go a little bit higher, keep it pitched. You got to bring the edges lower.
Right.
As long as there's no other pitch that is even higher.
And I think there's a blanket prohibition on that. Well, let's see, we're going to get to that, right?
Yes.
So let's,
So can we suggest that A11, so E4 be combined with A11, but we cover that loophole that should be 3 and 12 or less, and that it's once you cross the 3 and 12 threshold, that then it can go up to 25 feet.
Actually, no, I think we should, in light of
Please.
what's on the other A11, I think that we might want to keep this, but only keep the portion which shall not exceed 22 feet as measured, blah, blah, and strike out the 22 feet for a flat roof.
Okay, so you'd argue to keep E4 separate and just get rid of the 20-foot
Right.
flat. That's fair enough. I have no issue with that.
yeah, we're striking the 20-foot limit if we could.
Yeah.
And shall we jump to E6 then, since it's also talking about roof forms? E6 limits roof pitches to 3 and 12. And it limits, well, references an illustration, but what is it saying about gable shed, butterfly, or flat roof forms? At eaves permitted? I don't understand section B.
Use permit.
And C limits requires at least half of the roof eaves to be 2 foot minimum. So you have to be more than 2 feet elsewhere. So board member Adcock brought up the point that some Eichlers have steeper pitched roofs and are still very much Eichlers.
Yes.
What happens in that case if somebody wants a 12 and 12
Yeah,
center atrium with a glazed end?
Right, particularly if it's a lot split, there's a original Eichler house and you're trying to design as, you know, in relationship to that, like, for instance, my next door neighbor, I think they have a 5 to 12 roof. If they wanted to split, I don't know where they would, 'cause it's such a full lot, but if they did and wanted to build the other house with a similar look, they couldn't, right, because of this restriction.
As it's currently written, they would need to go through the individual review process to allow that.
That seems restrictive.
But can you come up with an objective standard? Otherwise, it's going to get complicated. 3 and 12 pitch, unless the roof of the existing house is less or more, then you can match that. I mean, how would you phrase it?
No steeper than slopes in the neighborhood houses or some way to like kind of,
How many?
They can't.
Yeah,
regulate that.
I know. Because 3 to 12, yeah, my house is 3 to 12, but at least 40% of my neighbors are way steeper than that.
Yeah.
In the little, you know, the front entrance and then there's the atrium and then there's the back, they're all much steeper.
I mean, I would argue that the intent of this is to make sure that we're not superimposing these massive buildings next to Eichler people that don't want to improve their homes, and that we are trying to be respectful with daylight planes and height limits and setbacks. And that's really the goal, is to allow for higher urban density while still being respectful of your neighbors. And on that note,
And 22 feet is already doing that, right? And the daylight lane.
right. But I think it's also trying to keep the flavor of the Eichler area.
Right.
I don't know. I do think that we're trying to create a set of rules that people can follow, right,
Right.
objectively, and that this is very clear and concise. And I think that once we start getting into, well, this house had it built this way at this time and we should follow, I think it gets more complicated, and that the intent is to keep Eichlers low slung, higher daylight plane. I mean, more daylight
Mhm.
coming in between them, and it's just sort of a lower profile neighborhood. So I would just argue,
You know, with
Do
a
the 3 and
20,
12 and
with
call
a
it a day.
22-foot height limit to the ridge,
Mhm.
you're not going to be doing too many steeply pitched
Right.
roofs. That's just such a limitation. When
Yeah.
You really think it through what that means.
but, and to counter argue that, the whole point of this is that we're getting these teeny tiny buildings now. We're getting like 20-foot wide buildings. You could very steeply pitch a 20-foot wide building, right? So
Not a 2-story one.
fair.
That's how this is measured.
Yeah.
I mean, 20 feet is what gives you an 8-foot and a 9-foot plate with flat roofs. The moment you pitch it a little bit, certainly not a 12 and 12 pitch, you're out of luck. I mean, I think I'm comfortable though, Board Member Adcock, just leaving this to the IR process. There's just too many variables about
Yeah.
how this would fit. Really what it has to do with is not making it overwhelm the scale of the building, which is what Eichlers do. The steep pitch pieces are generally smaller.
Mhm. About a third of the house.
And then they fit in quite attractively.
Mhm.
But done over the whole building in an effort to maximize volume, it could be a disaster.
Yeah,
So much of it has to do with the scale.
right. Yeah, agreed. Yeah, because this.
Arnold,
might
do you have an
apply to the
opinion on
whole
this
house.
question? Should we?
Well, I think that this element has 3 different pieces to it, and you could end up with a building with a really like a 45-degree roof plane and then a flat roof on at 22 feet. So you could end up with a building that has a really chunky form that doesn't really kind of work with the Eichlers. If you allow steeper roof pitches. And also, I think this E6 guideline is trying to get to the typology of the roof lines typically in Eichlers, which are low, they're planar elements, they have overhangs. You don't see a lot of like additive massing. It's very simple planar elements and simple shed gable roof lines that you typically see, or flat roof lines. So I think that's the intention of this. And it comes out again out of the both the IR guidelines and the ICLA guideline language. So there's always going to be those one-off situations, and I think that's where it's good where people can come back and ask to go through the IR guidelines for that. Plus, if we're dealing with an addition to an existing house, the addition itself would automatically go through the IR guidelines.
Right.
Could you clarify what item B is in this section? Gable, shed, butterfly, or flat roof forms are permitted?
Yes.
So what's not permitted then under that section?
Standard hip roofs that don't have a flat roof edge. You know, other sort of like, you know, mansardy type roofs or Dutch gables, things like that.
It sounds somewhat subjective.
They're just based on the Eichler, what's typically done in Eichlers.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't understand the part B at all. It's like, meet the following: gable, shed, butterfly, or flat roof forms, but the parentheses of note hip roofs with flat roof at eave permitted. See
Yeah, that is
illustration.
directly referencing a diagram in the individual review guideline document. So I'll go ahead and pull that up for you.
Is this a diagram referencing Eichler design or all design?
This illustration was put in, this predates the Eichler guidelines, but it was put in response to Eichler neighborhoods asking for some sort of responsiveness to their context. And this is guideline 1. And this is generally showing positioning of the upper floor in an Eichler neighborhood, but it's also showing that the roof line here was done as a hip roof line, but not a standard hip roof line with a flat sort of soffit kind of edge. So the goal here was to kind of show a sense of transition without completely sort of ignoring the Eichler context. That was the original intent of this diagram. So we were just trying to make it consistent where as opposed to like a typical hip roof on, say, a Mediterranean building would be detailed differently.
When the roofs are 3 and 12, the truth is you all only see the fascia anyway. And so the hip roof and a flat roof will appear more or less the same. But I'm fine with this the way it's written if it's coming out of existing guidelines. Don't want to recreate stuff. But
This is very weird. What's the roof material there, right?
well, you do
How is
an
it
you do an
draining?
inboard gutter instead of having an attached sheet metal
Yeah.
gutter. You just have a bit of roofing there with a drain.
Yeah.
What's the dimension? Is there a minimum dimension?
2 feet is, oh, no,
There's no
that's not
minimum
what this is.
This is a certified depth requirement.
In this case, the roof pitch would be 312 or less. And like Peter said, that you wouldn't see a gutter on the outside of the building. You just see a fascia board with the gutter set behind.
Right. I'm just worrying about the detailing of going from a, I don't know, asphalt shingle roof to a flat roof to where's the gutter? And that's unrelated to what we're talking about.
No, it's just challenging to build too.
Yeah.
So
Should we allow this type of roof structure to be built?
we shouldn't regulate this kind of thing.
But we're regulating Eichlers for everything else. We're saying gable, shed, butterfly with flat, and then we're also allowing, sorry, microphone. We're allowing, I mean, we are regulating this. We're regulating gable, shed, butterfly, or flat, but then we also have this funky exception for this odd, to put it nicely, one-off roof condition that everybody on this board is looking at going, wait, who's going to design this and
Yeah,
who's going
so
to build
maybe we
this?
should, if you want a hip roof on your Eichler, you go through IR.
Yeah,
I think
I mean,
so.
I think that's
Height-
I
that.
think that whole, the note part should just be.
Yeah, just strike
struck
the
out, yeah.
note.
I mean, Arnold, would that work if we just said it has
Yeah.
to be a flat or single plane slope roof?
That would be fine. Because everyone does have the option of going through IR.
Yeah.
Okay, and the
Thank you.
third part of this was regarding the minimum eave size, at least around at least half of the building.
That's fair.
Is that right? I'm reading this correct. It's a 2-foot minimum eave.
Yes.
That's pretty typical.
Is there a maximum?
No.
Property line would Provide the max range and setback. from
Isn't there a
property.
daylight plane projection
Right, yeah.
maximum of 4 feet or something?
The-
Go ahead, Arnold.
Yes, you can project up to 2 feet into the daylight plane.
2 feet.
And you can project up to 4 feet without it counting as lot coverage. But typically Eichler's have overhangs between 2 and 3 feet.
My concern would be that is if it's an ADU setback at 4 feet and then they're allowed to project 4 feet, then their roof setback will touch their property line, which is a
I think
little bit
Arnold was saying
concerning.
you're allowed to project 2 feet.
2 feet into the setback.
Yeah.
Okay.
I wonder if we could
you.
tag on that and say that if you make your eaves bigger in an Eichler, it doesn't count towards lot coverage. I'm just working through a project where lot coverage, believe it or not, is really the driving issue. And, it's that extra bit of roof. If you prevent Eichlers from having a larger roof overhang, that's not our objective.
Correct.
So the zoning code, and again, everything in the zoning code would still apply to an SB9 project, allows for eaves up to 4 feet. If it's beyond 4 feet, then it starts counting towards lot coverage.
Oh, so
And
it's
we're
not-
not proposed to change anything about
Is
that.
it 2 feet or 4 feet that counts towards lot coverage?
4 feet.
Okay, well, then it's fine. I think this is fine then.
Yeah.
So we've asked that you change the section B just to be single plane roofs. Everything else is okay?
Yes.
We're all on board with that? Everybody's shaking their head. Let's step back to section E5. This is regarding whether garages are the one-story form. Did we get rid of that requirement in the other section to begin with?
Yes, I need to go back because obviously 2.5A is not what.
It should be
that-
A2. No, actually, never mind. It's not
No,
A2
I
because
think
it got
it's
renumbered again.
I think it's,
Yeah.
oh, I was gonna say A9.
Guys renumbered it so many times I got confused.
I think it's B. It's a B something. It was B2. I think.
B5 regulates height.
Height and mass, but then A16 is that facade visual focal point that's also tying into this.
And if I go on my crosswalk document to A16, that was 4.1A.
B2, there you go. Single-story building forms may serve as the one-story form in standard 2.5A. So that's single-story building forms. All houses with frontage on the street shall either have a one-story building form excluding garages. So this is basically allowing for those garages to be that building form.
Mhm.
So this relates back to B2. Thank you, Claire. I would just say, I think it's good. I think it makes sense. I would just shift it up next to the other garage Eichler comment. So it's not farther away from that comment.
Does item A16 then also restrict Eichler design? I can't fully read that on my packet.
Sorry, which one?
A16 is regarding the facade visual focal point.
A16 has been modified as a part of our previous discussions to essentially only be requiring windows of a certain dimension. Let me get back to that note. Yes, so it changed to each street-facing building elevation shall have at least 20 square feet of glazing in a window with a minimum dimension of 3 feet. And so we would still keep that requirement for the Eichlers. They would still need to have at least one street-facing window that's at least 20 square feet.
Arnold, does that apply to you? Will that work, do you think, for Eichlers? Is that a restrictive thing?
I don't think it's overly restrictive. Because they could have a high, like a clear story window too. It doesn't really regulate that. So in the ICLA typology, I don't think it's overly restrictive.
Okay. Anybody else have any concerns? Let's keep going through this then. So E5, we're okay with? Okay, so then we're on E7, exterior materials. Vertical board channel or flush siding, tongue and groove, nickel gap. Or board form concrete, stucco. Anybody have any concerns or questions? Does this make sense? Icors have actually a very specific kind of plywood resawn siding that's genuinely through and it's available, but we don't want to specify to that level of detail. Okay, so E7 is fine. Last one is E8, entries. No projecting porches. Covered trellis or a side porch would be considered, not be considered. Okay. Any questions or concerns? Okay, so those are fine. So any questions from staff? Did we give complete feedback on the Eichler section?
Sorry, yes. I've taken notes of your feedback and don't have any questions at this time.
Okay, so we're done with the study session. Board member Hirsch had wanted to, I believe, make a comment about something. David, did you want to do that about this SB9 thing? As far as I'm concerned,
yeah.
we've gone through the staff's request for our feedback on SB9 objective standards. So that's the end of it for our input.
Seemed like we left a piece off.
But you said earlier, you told me that you had some concerns about this. So I want to give you.
Too many concerns.
Well, I'll give you a couple of minutes if you want to address it now. Otherwise, we're going to close the meeting.
That's too short a time and too many objections.
Well, we only have so much time. You can have as many objections as you please. Okay, so with that, any other board member questions, comments, announcements? No? So then we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Happy
you. Happy
holidays.
holidays.